The tall, magical tower of Bogomeren rose against the backdrop of the starry night sky. Strange, disturbing sounds emanated from its depths. Someone was telling a man to gather his strength and not dare lose consciousness, because they weren't done with him yet. Chains were visible all around, and anatomical posters of the human body hung on the walls. An order was given to administer the stimulant again. In total, he lasted 461 seconds. Today, he lasted a little longer with this reagent. Given these results, it can be said that this is a talented experimental subject, a truly useful thing. They were talking about a young man hanging from chains and bleeding to death. The man said that this was the 70-second stimulator of the magic power circuit. Can we already consider that the magic circle has been activated and the immunization vaccine suppressed? Another man looking at the test subject said that this was a good result. They also administered a stimulator that expands memory. In this magic tower, known as the strongest in the empire, the young man was slowly dying. Why was someone like him, whose gifted mind was recognized, here? In this secret laboratory, there were containers with ants everywhere. An order was given to forcibly activate the stimulant. After that, the prisoner began coughing up blood. His condition deteriorated noticeably. The young man screamed for them to stop. He couldn't take it anymore. He clenched his fists, bound by chains, and blood appeared on his wrists. The man said that this test subject was too noisy and added that he was waiting for a report after the experiment was completed. One of the young men told the head of the tower that he would do everything. He was still tormented by the question, why was he here? Why was he dying in the magical tower he had once dreamed of entering? One of the observers lifted the prisoner's head by his hair and asked how Verdun was feeling. He had to pull himself together and not lose consciousness. The observer said that the magician from Verdun had turned out to be useless, but he had managed to get cocky because people had praised his intelligence a little. That was why Verdun's life force and knowledge were now being extracted in a secret research laboratory. The young man told Verdun to do something clever, as usual, and prove himself. Verdun was kneeling, suspended by chains on his hands. His bloodied body was completely exhausted. The young man said that Verdun couldn't even lose consciousness in this state. The guy looked back and asked what Verdun was staring at. He saw that the experimental ants had scattered in different directions and ordered that this be corrected immediately. The assistants apologized to Weller. Weller said that Verdun was almost an insect. He didn't have an ounce of magical power, not even enough to break his chains, so no one missed him. Although that was even better for them. Thanks to him, they now had an S-rank experimental subject. The friend with whom he entered the magic tower received sponsorship to study abroad. One could feel sorry for Rovlin. She ended up with such a friend. Some ants were crushed on the floor. Verdun told them to shut up. Weller was surprised that he was the one muttering there. Verdun shouted at the top of his lungs, demanding that those bastards shut up immediately. It all started 15 years ago. The young man had no parents and grew up in an orphanage. His dream was to become an incredible magician. In the end, he came to the magic tower to study magic. But no matter how hard he tried, he could not become a magician. The problem was the rank 1 development restriction. At the age of 7, the boy took a test to determine his compatibility with magic. The results showed that he would never become a magician. He was untalented. This was a serious blow to the child. However, he did not give up because becoming a mage was his dream. So he secretly took books left in the rooms while he was cleaning. He also studied many books from the library of the magic tower. Even though he had no magical powers, he had no doubts in his mind. Several years passed in this way. Verdun turned out to be a genius. He finally became a research assistant at the magic tower. His colleague added that genius was an understatement. How could a simple researcher come up with such an idea? This was recognized not only by the entire magic tower, but also by its head, Mr. Balrog. It was then that Verdun realized a truth he had not known before. His mind was not just talented, it was genius. Verdun thanked Lucar and said he needed to prove this thesis before the presentation. Lucard unexpectedly asked if Verdun had shown this to anyone else. Verdun admitted that he had only shared it with him. Lucard was the only close colleague who recognized Verdun. Perhaps he had a chance to remain in the tower not as a servant, but as a scientist. That's what Verdun thought until Lucard made his work public, passing it off as his own. Verdun found out too late and immediately went to the head of the tower. Verdun argued with Balrog that he was the one who had come up with it. The work disappeared the day before the presentation, and then Lucard presented it under his own name. The head of the tower asked if Verdun really meant to say that he was the author of the theory of multidimensional continuity. Verdun believed that the respected head of the magical tower, Bogomirn Balrog Bessias, would not leave the matter at that. The young man said he was ready to explain everything from the beginning. Balrog replied that it was all very surprising. The head of the tower added that he did not know that there was such talent among ordinary researchers. Balrog smiled and told Verdun to come to his laboratory in 2 days, when the moon would be hidden. Now he wondered if he hadn't gone to the head of the tower that day. If he had run away from the tower then, would he have been able to live normally for the next 7 years? That's how he was forcibly confined to the head of the tower's laboratory. Weller called the prisoner a pathetic nobody who was always resisting. Tomorrow they would have to increase the intensity of the experiment. Verdun became a day laborer and a nighttime subject for experiments. Verdun was told that they would try to create a magic circle on him to confirm his theory. They would inject drugs into his veins and observe his reaction, testing the effectiveness of new potions. Now the young man's life would be completely devoted to the magic tower. No one believed Verdun when he tried to reveal the truth. In response, the head of the tower threatened to destroy those dear to him. The young man thought that now everything was over. What could he do? The boy closed his eyes and images from his childhood floated before him. He was running after a girl named Rovalyn. He remembered his childhood. When she grew up a little, Rovalyn suggested that they become great magicians. The girl asked Verdun to promise her that. The young people crossed their fingers and made a promise to each other. Verdun wondered if his potential for development had been a little higher. Could everything have turned out differently? At that moment, the young man was in a solitary cell, which was filled with ants. Was it really all over? Verdun thought he heard that sound again. He heard it every time during the experiments. Did he still have any strength left? Maybe it would be better to just fade into oblivion? Verdun crushed one of the ants. The young man caught himself thinking that it was too early to give up. After all, he didn't want that. Nothing was over yet. Verdun's entire body was covered with ants again. For the sake of revenge and survival, he had to hold on, grit his teeth, and endure. A voice inside told him that Verdun would be reborn and would never be trampled on again. He would gain great power and exceed his own capabilities. Verdun decided that he must sharpen the blade of revenge for the past 7 years until it was razor sharp. The young man decided that he was not broken and would be able to solve this one and only problem. In the face of great power, it is not enough to be smarter than others. It is necessary to challenge fate, disregard the boundaries of theory, and complete the creation of a method for restructuring the body. It is necessary to develop a theory of resistance to the heavens. Verdun clearly decided that tomorrow he would surpass his abilities. The prerequisites for this already existed. The long-awaited theory of defying the heavens, which would allow him to restructure his body, was completed at the moment he accepted his death. Now all that remained was to prove it. This artifact could allow him to use magic once. Verdun decided that magic would develop in him in the course of further activity. Verdun decided that tomorrow evening he would regain his freedom. A long night passed, and finally the day came when the young man had to carry out his plan. In the morning, Veller said it was time to clean up the laboratory. The blood had to be wiped away and the cuts healed. Had Verdun really cried all night after this little experiment? The festival was coming soon, so there was no time to slack off. Once in the laboratory, Verdun began to tidy everything up, carefully cleaning everything. Rovalyn appeared in the office and asked if he was cleaning up alone. Verdun asked why Rovalyn was there. The girl replied that she had come to say goodbye to her friend before leaving. Verdun remembered that Rovalyn had told him that she would now be studying abroad in the magical city of Viren. Only the most talented students of the Magic Tower are granted such a special privilege. Verdun congratulated the girl and expressed his hope that everything would go well for her. Rovalyn said that her offer was still open and that he could go with her to Viren. She noted that he would not have to deal with ignorant fools who despised him. Verdun would be able to find new opportunities to study magic. The girl blushed with embarrassment and told Verdun not to misunderstand her. She just wanted someone to talk to, that's all. Verdun smiled politely and said that he would stay here and write to her regularly. Verdun looked sadly at the departing carriage. Rovalyn knew nothing. She did not know what was really going on here. The young man heard a voice behind him demanding that Verdun follow him immediately. Verdun was grateful to the girl for one thing. She did not interfere with his plan. The Magic Festival was one of the most famous holidays in the world. It was dedicated to the construction of the first magic tower and celebrated the rebirth of magic. It was the busiest day in the tower. When the festival begins, all high-ranking magicians go to large cities. Only low-ranking ones remain in their places. Verdun knocked on the door and entered. The man asked what brought him there at such an hour. The young man replied that the head of the tower had asked him to tidy up the treasure vault. The man said that he should have asked permission in advance. Couldn't he have thought of that? The manager allowed him to enter the vault, but warned Verdun to be careful and not scratch anything there. Verdun said he understood and opened the door to the treasure vault. The first thing the young man did was activate the artifact that blocks sound. To do this, he just had to put his hand on the corresponding sphere. Verdun decided that this was the moment when everything would begin and descended the magical air staircase. The young man saw magical rings and dials in front of him. He was interested in the second circle, an ancient artifact, the creation of which had cost the head of the tower an astronomical sum. It allowed the mage to use 3 spells and temporarily awakened the hidden talents of its owner. Verdun decided that he would need a staff to carry out his plan. To take it, he had to disable the protective magic circle. It required unlocking a 7th level spell. The head of the tower had cast it himself. For 7 whole years, our hero studied how to remove the spell. Verdun decided that he would destroy what the head of the tower was so proud of with his own hands. One of the people at the table complained that everyone else was enjoying the festival, while they were forced to guard the source of power. The second person said that there was nothing they could do about it, because they had drawn the short straw. The man with a huge mug in his hand said that was exactly why he was putting up with it. If it were a matter of skill, he would definitely have been chosen. The door opened and Verdun appeared in the doorway. The man said that the guy had arrived just in time and should bring more drinks. This man declared that when he became the head of the tower, he would no longer drink cheap alcohol. His colleague remarked that it was not easy to become the head of the tower. Verdun turned around and left the room with his staff in his hand. The man declared that he would definitely become the head of the tower. His colleague promised him free drinks in connection with this. Verdun waved his staff and began to carry out his plan. The man asked what the young man was doing. The man at the table asked if Verdun had gone mad. The young man did not expect such a reaction. The man jumped up from the table and shouted how this traitor dared to try to harm the mage. He would have to knock some sense into him. A 3rd-level magic spell, Tsunami, was used. A surge of excess energy appeared in the room. Verdun responded with a 3rd-level Earth Spear spell. The tsunami was broken and suppressed. The mage saw the Earth Spear rapidly approaching him and did not even have time to be afraid. As a result of this attack, the mage was wounded in the chest and began to bleed. Most of all, he did not understand how Verdun was able to do this. After all, he was only a pitiful 1st level. How did he manage to use magic? Verdun asked if the mage was surprised that the test subject was capable of such a thing. This is what happens when you play too much with people. It was the first time Verdun had seen the source of the magic tower's power so closely. It took 7 years to reach this point. Now, using the mana from the source, the young man would begin his confrontation with the heavens. If he failed, he did not know what would become of him. However, if he doesn't try, he will never know for sure. With a staff in his hand, the protagonist found himself in the center of the magic circle in front of the source of the magic tower's power. The reformation of his body began, and lightning flashed around the young man. The confrontation with the heavens began. Verdun screamed from the strongest surge of excess energy that burst out. A huge, powerful beam of light burst out of the tower and shot vertically into the sky, illuminating everything around it. The man traveling in the carriage noticed this colossal burst of energy from the source. The reason became clear. The head of the tower realized that someone had broken into his magical tower. Verdun, staff in hand, climbed out from under the rubble of the destroyed building. The force was so destructive that it swept away the entire structure. If he was still alive, then everything had worked out. The young man looked around and saw someone approaching him at great speed. Could it be the head of the magic tower? He must have sensed that something had happened to his people. The head of the magic tower saw the destruction and headed for where his tower had just stood. The head of the magic tower couldn't believe his eyes. Could this be the magic circle of teleportation? How dare he touch the magic tower? The Balrog shouted that whoever it was, even the emperor himself or a small child, he would be found and destroyed. Verdun thought he really wanted to sleep. He couldn't even move. It would be nice to stay here a little longer. Where did the sound of water come from? Where was he now? The young man looked into the water and saw his reflection. What had happened? Why had his appearance changed? His chestnut hair had turned ash gray. His black pupils had lightened and his eyes were now pure blue. Verdun had become a completely different person. Could something have happened during the reconstruction of his body? Verdun thought that he had dealt with those people from the magic tower and overcome the opposition of the heavens. Before the head of the tower could find him, he quickly disappeared using teleportation magic. Verdun had never seen such a forest. There were no such plants in the magic tower. That meant he had teleported across half a continent. In other words, the young man had managed to transform his body and escape in time through a pre-prepared magic circle. Verdun shouted loudly that he was finally free. The young man wondered how the head of the tower was feeling now. He must be furious. If the tower was destroyed, they would have to find the culprit and learn that their lab rat had escaped. However, this was not enough to completely destroy the magic tower. They may have lost their employees, but the head of the tower would definitely take countermeasures. Besides, it was not for nothing that Balroga Bessian was called the Almighty Man. Verdun thought that would be enough for now. The towers would be rebuilt, and in the meantime, he would become stronger in order to carry out his revenge. Verdun decided that he would destroy everything the head of the tower built before his eyes, and his name would be preserved in history. Revenge and fulfillment as a mage. These were the protagonist's goals. He decided that he could say goodbye to the magic tower. In the forest, there was a monster trying to chop a box with an axe. The young man activated the windcutter skill, and the monster was destroyed. Verdun looked at his hand and thought that he felt absolutely no difference when using this skill. The guy assumed that a problem had arisen during the reconstruction of his body. Except for the color of his eyes and hair, his appearance had not changed much. Even his mana volume remained the same. Verdun decided that he would not be able to find out what had happened for now. But if goblins were roaming the area, it meant that the village was not far away. The young man approached a box lying on the ground and saw cart tracks nearby. Someone had been in a hurry and dropped their belongings. Verdun activated his mana detection skill. He wanted to find the owner of this box. Verdun found a trail leading straight to the cart, which was still moving away. There was a young man in the cart. He was alarmed and frightened, urging on his skittish horse. The young man did not understand what was happening or how he had gotten himself into this mess. The fact that they had run into the remnants of a bandit gang, whose numbers had recently dwindled, was not a problem. The young man understood that his inability to negotiate and his talk about having connections with Baron Pite, as well as the fact that all his mercenaries had fled in fear, were not a problem either. But what was that creepy smile on the orc's face? The orc was busy attacking the bandits, so the young man was able to jump into the cart and quickly drive away. The boy in the cart heard a loud roar behind him and thought he was being chased. The young man continued to spur the horse on and shout for it to hurry up. The wheel of the cart hit a huge rock and the cart overturned. The young man flew to the side and fell to the ground. The boy came to his senses and got to his feet. His back hurt badly from the blow. The young man looked around and saw someone's eyes glowing in the dark forest. There were many of them. Danger was approaching. Monsters emerged from the forest. There were many of them, and they looked scary and terrifying. The young man couldn't believe that monsters could destroy him after all. The bloodthirsty monsters, brandishing their weapons, rushed at the young man. He thought it was the end. The next moment, a stone wall appeared around the young man on all sides. The monsters couldn't reach him. The young man found himself completely inside the stone mountain. The man watching from the sidelines thought that they should have left an air hole for the young man. Verdun, for it was he, jumped onto the hill and decided that he would be able to deal with the monsters before the guy suffocated. Verdun decided that this was his first real fight, not counting that goblin. The monsters, showing their fury, rushed at the protagonist. Verdun thought this was a great opportunity to test his abilities. He used fire magic. In the next moment, multi-fire arrows flew at the monsters, instantly burning their targets. The leader of the monsters gave orders to surround and neutralize this man. Verdun activated the whirlwind skill immediately after the multi-fire arrows. This was followed by a double spell. It was the use of two skills at once. A wave of fiery arrows rained down on the monsters. Verdun controlled their direction with his hands. The protagonist was surprised because previously he would not have been able to destroy even one goblin. The increase in strength was obvious. After a while, Verdun looked around. No one was left alive. He thought that this guy needed to be freed before he suffocated. Otherwise, why had he come all this way? Suddenly, a huge monster appeared behind the young man. Could it be that it had survived? After a while, the young man was driving his cart again. He said his name was Conrad and that he would never forget today. Behind him in the cart was Verdun. The young man asked how he could thank his savior. Verdun told him to watch the road, otherwise the cart might overturn again. Conrad asked the passenger if the horde of monsters posed a danger, or at least a threat to him. The protagonist thought that this guy talked too much. Verdun believed that it was actually a little dangerous. At the very moment when our hero realized that one monster had survived after all, there was no time to think. Verdun dodged the monster's attack and activated the wind cutter skill. The monster's head flew off to the side. The young man said there was nothing to worry about. Verdun asked Conrad how often monsters appeared in this area. He had heard that thieves usually avoided places where monsters lived. The wagon driver replied that this was the first time he had encountered them here. Conrad added that this forest was under the control of Baron Pate. The young man added that he had often exchanged letters with him as a child. He had been told that thieves in this area had been exterminated. That was why he had taken the usual route without taking other mercenaries with him. However, luck had abandoned him today. Verdun had previously thought that the teleportation had failed, but apparently it had taken him to the right place, since he had ended up on Baron Pate's lands. Verdun believed that even if he had covered all his tracks and changed his appearance, the magical Tower of Bogomern could still search for him. For now, he needed to hide his identity and become stronger. Conrad asked if his traveling companion was listening. Verdun said he had forgotten to introduce himself. Our hero said his name was Asher. The young man decided that he would use the name Verdun when he met with the head of the tower. The carriage pulled up to Baron Pate's estate. It was already dark outside. The Baron asked what had happened to Conrad on the road. Conrad smiled and said that he had lost some weight while running from the orcs. Pate approached the young man and asked if he was all right. Conrad replied that he had been attacked not only by thieves, but also by monsters. Pate looked at our hero and asked if this was the mage who had helped his friend. The Baron added that he would not stand aside if his friend's savior was right in front of him. Verdun thanked the Baron for providing him with clothes, food, and lodging. The owner of the estate remembered that he had not yet introduced himself to his guest. His name was Baron Pate Henrod, and he was the steward of these lands. Pate pointed to the table laden with delicacies and asked if Asher liked the food. The protagonist replied that it was simply amazing. Pate added that he had prepared 5 million elks for saving Conrad. When could he give them to the young man? The Baron also added that, if the young man did not mind, he would prefer to hire him for work. The pay would be decent. Verdun understood that he needed funds to achieve his goal. In addition, he would be able to train his magical abilities in battle. The young man asked the Baron what kind of work it was. Pate said that a few days ago they had found bodies hanging in the South Forest. The investigation showed that they were all residents of a neighboring farming town. The town itself was found in ruins. Pate continued, at first they were not sure who was responsible, but later learned that it was the work of bandits. However, after searching the entire area, they found nothing. It was as if all traces of them had been erased by magic. Asher suggested that there might be a mage among the bandits. Pate admitted that it all looked rather suspicious. Asher asked when the Baron planned to pursue them. Pate replied that it would be in 4 days. At the appointed time, a knight approached the young man and said that he represented Baron Pate. He was also responsible for this task. His name was Enoch. Enoch Harris said that the dark-haired guy's name was Harris, and the young guy's name was Peric. The protagonist greeted the knight and said his name was Asher. The young man thought it would be a good opportunity, but did not expect to have to chase bandits. Pate said that it was better to nip such things in the bud. Verdun decided that this would be his punishment for staying here. Enoch pointed to 2 people and said they were adventurers. They had gathered as soon as they heard that orcs had recently appeared. Verdun thought that the reward must be very high. Even the adventurers here were gold-ranked. Gold-ranked adventurers were on the same level as ordinary knights. In other words, they were experienced veterans who knew how to use energy to strengthen themselves and their weapons. Rumor has it that with such a rank, they are capable of destroying monsters single-handedly. Verdun wondered why they needed him, despite having 3 knights. Enoch replied that second-rank mages are usually as strong as knights, but they would have a hard time if the enemy used ranged spells. It would be best not to deal with a mage at all. Asher said they were unlucky. He saw a magic circle in front of him. The dispel skill was activated. Enoch wondered where the magic circle had suddenly appeared from. How could something like this be on their territory? Verdun suggested that the spell he had just removed was just a camouflage. The rest had to be removed. Everyone had to stay in their places. The knights were amazed. Could this guy really destroy the magic circle so easily? Who was he? Explorers belong to a guild that accepts orders from all over the continent to explore unknown territories or scare away monsters that bother people. Death always follows adventurers. But despite this, people admire them, because with their abilities come wealth and fame. However, when an adventurer becomes too powerful and experiences many situations in which he finds himself on the brink of death, he loses control and turns his blade on other people. As a result, he turns into an ordinary bandit. An armed man stood over the carcass of a destroyed animal. He said that the damage from Payet's attack had not been compensated, and now they were suddenly attacked by orcs and goblins. In addition, there were very few provisions left. The armed man ordered his assistants to stop loafing around and go hunting. The knights, peeking out from the bushes, decided that these were the very bandits they were looking for. Perrick asked the senior knight, Enoch, what they should do. They were ready to wait for his instructions. Enoch decided to attack immediately because the robbers had let their guard down. Verdun asked them to wait. The young man said that he was accompanying the knights as someone who had to fight against magic, but they had not yet fully assessed the enemy. If the enemy mage had more circles than he did, they could lose. Verdun added that he had come up with something. The armed man said that after all the efforts he had made to expand the working territory, the subordinates hired from the previous village had also been destroyed. His colleague advised Verdun to calm down and think about what to do next. Who would have thought that an orc, laughing like a jester, would come and kill all their subordinates? When he worked as a researcher, he could not have imagined that something like this would happen. Varga suggested that Vilshan attack another village. However, Vilshan replied that the Baron was angered by those hanged from the trees, so they would not attack. Vilshan added that they had been hiding thanks to concealment magic, but now it was time to move on. They say there is a town called Martes nearby. They could loot the neighboring village. Suddenly, a fire attack was launched against these people. Vilshan used his magical abilities and said that a sudden magical explosion had been activated against them. This meant that someone had discovered them. At that moment, all three knights attacked the robbers. A mana barrier is a defensive ability that can be used quickly, but it is easy to destroy because it is not very strong. Destroying the barrier sends a backlash to the caster. Verdun said that one of their opponents was a mage and that his power was now clear. He was ready to deal with this mage, as they had agreed. Enoch replied that he was counting on Lord Asher. Varga understood everything and said that this time the Baron had sent people to destroy them. He hired the mage and the others, but his plan is not working. Varga and Enoch met face to face. Verdun began to chase the fleeing Vilshan. The robber planned to escape but did not expect anyone to chase him. Vilshan thought that fortunately his pursuer was using an earth wall. However, only those with 3 circles or more can fly. Vilshan asked how long his opponent was going to stand aside. Multi-ice arrows were activated. Vilshan decided he had to strike first. His opponent only had 2 circles, which meant he could attack him and only then leave. Verdun used fire arrows. Vilshan dodged the attack and thought it wasn't bad for someone with 2 circles. However, this guy had chosen the wrong opponent. Vilshan could see the outline of a person through the veil of smoke. He said that if his opponent had come with a knight, his position would have been disadvantageous. However, he could deal with such an opponent and then run away. Verdun appeared from the dissipating smoke. He said that he did not plan to let his opponent go. Vilshan noted that this was too much confidence and a rare ability to use complex attributive magic at such a young age. It had been a long time since he had met such a promising talent. Vilshan said that this youngster probably did not think that this would be the end of him. The 3rd circle magic falling ice was activated. Vilshan raised his hands and tried to block the attack with magic. However, his opponent easily neutralized Vilshan's spell. Our hero activated his earth spears. Verdun proved to be invulnerable. Vilshan was frightened and surprised at how a mage with 2 circles could use a 3rd circle spell. Vilshan continued to be amazed. Not only did this guy use a 3rd circle spell, but he also possessed 4 attributes. Had he been deceiving everyone from the very beginning? Vilshan was attacked, and the earth spear pierced his body through and through. Verdun thought it was good that he had come here. Now he knew how to fight against a mage. A loud roar could be heard. The sound came from a huge monster. The monster was holding the bloodied body of a bandit in its hands. 2 days before the expedition, Verdun created an experimental medicine using ingredients brought from the magic tower. He called it magic expansion chains. The young man recalled the hellish days he had spent in the magic tower. He no longer had any desire to conduct experiments on humans again. However, thanks to this medicine, our hero was able to attain the third circle. Verdun, looking at Wilshan lying on the ground, thought that this mage seemed to have perished. It was necessary to bring proof of victory over the bandits so that he would be believed and earn trust. Verdun became interested in the staff that was in the mage's hand. The protagonist took the staff in his hands and assessed it. It was a magical stone wand with a spell cast on it. It reduced the time it took to cast spells and increased the effectiveness of those related to ice. The young man decided that such a thing could be useful to him. Perik appeared nearby. He asked if Verdun was okay. Perik said that when they had dealt with all the bandits, he began to worry about Asher. Our hero apologized and noted that his opponent had turned out to be stronger than expected, so it took a little longer than anticipated. Perik suggested that, judging by the destruction around them, the fight had been very difficult. Verdun asked if the knights had dealt with the bandits. Perik replied that only the leader of the bandits remained, and Enoch was now dealing with him. Perik added that Enoch should be done by the time they got there. Verdun asked Perik what should be done with the bandits' belongings. Perik replied that their lord allowed them to take whatever they liked, as long as he did not need it himself. Verdun remembered Baron Pyatt and thought to himself that this wand would be very useful to him. Enoch said that Asher had done a good job. If it weren't for the mage's help, they would have had more problems. Asher noted that it had been a good experience for him. The captured Varya was puzzled. Had these people really destroyed Vilshina? It seemed impossible to him. Varga thought that if this continued, they would be taken to the Lord and executed. He couldn't die like this in a village, because there was still so much he wanted to see in this world. Varga decided that he had no choice and needed to escape immediately. He jumped to his feet, pushed the knight away, and ran toward the forest. Varga looked at his opponents and thought that without Vilshan's magic, he would not be able to defeat them. That meant there was only one way out. The robber decided to kill the knight, steal his horse, and run away. To achieve his goal, Varya approached Enoch. However, Enoch proved to be stronger. He grabbed his opponent by the hand holding the sword, and with his other hand, the knight clutched Varga by the collar. Enoch threw his opponent to the ground over his hip and ordered his subordinates to tie him up so that he could not move. Enoch swung his sword over the robber and said that he was not here to joke around. After the bandit was destroyed, Enoch apologized to the mage for the unsightly scene. Enoch added that he didn't usually fight like that. If he had had more time, he would have cut off his opponent's head. Asher said he was impressed. Asher looked at the other bandits and asked why they had been left alive. Enoch replied that there were familiar faces among them. Perhaps some of them were survivors of the attack on Farmer's Town. He planned to take them to the estate to find out who they were before deciding their fate. Harris told everyone to get ready to return to the estate. They would take the bandits with them. One of the bandits jumped to his feet and started running toward the forest. He shouted that he didn't want to die. Harris drew his sword from its sheath and said he would deal with this guy himself. Asher asked the knight to wait a moment. The fugitive disappeared into the forest but immediately cried out and began calling for help. Verdun said he could smell blood. The fugitive's bloodied head flew out of the forest. The knights couldn't believe it. Were there really orcs hiding in the forest? Asher said it was quite possible. A huge monster emerged from the forest. It was the one the adventurers had been unable to defeat. Verdun wondered if this monster could really be called an orc. Moreover, our hero sensed that this monster was not alone. A dozen similar creatures followed him. Most likely, the knights were facing the leader of these creatures. This monster resembled the one from last time. The corners of its mouth were long, making it appear as if it were smiling. Its height was impressive. The monster towered over the other members of its species. Verdun thought that it must be an advanced level. The leader of this pack gave the order to attack the knights. Enoch ordered the knights to take up defensive positions. First, they needed to focus on the goblins. They would worry about the orcs later. Enoch jumped high into the air and struck the monster leader in the chest with his sword. The monster fell to the ground and growled loudly, bleeding profusely. The huge monster grabbed a small green goblin and squeezed it tightly in its fist. What the knights saw shocked them greatly. The monster ate the green goblin. Only bones remained. After that, the leader of the pack got to his feet and picked up his sword. Verdun was surprised because the monster had healed itself after eating its fellow creature. Enoch suggested that they would not be returning home safely. The monster swung and threw his huge sword at the knights. The knight put his blade forward and barely managed to parry the attack. But why did this orc suddenly throw his sword? The orc's sword shattered into small pieces. The shards of the broken sword pierced Harris's body. Bleeding profusely, he cried out loudly. Enoch shouted for Perrick to be careful. The unarmed monster approached him, but when did he have time? Perrick decided to simply strike the monster's arm, which he did. However, Perrick's sword got stuck in the monster's arm, and it was impossible to pull it out. The next moment, the Earth Spear skill was activated. The monster was subjected to an intense attack. Asher shouted for Perrick to step back a little and stand behind him. Perrick did so, and said that he was fine now. Perrick was upset. He didn't know what to do, because now he couldn't get his sword back. Asher suggested that the monster's recovery speed and physical endurance had increased after it ate the goblin. Perrick said he had struck with all his might, trying to wound the monster's arm. He had never heard before that orcs could be so strong. Perhaps this was a special creature from the legends? Recovery and strengthening through absorption, control over those below. This monster was clearly different from an ordinary orc. Its strength was comparable to that of a knight. Verdun thought that if that was all, then this monster was too weak to be called a special being. Ordinary spells have limits. Even if more magic is invested, the area of effect will not expand beyond a fixed size. If the limit is exceeded, the magic itself will fade away. Such is the law of magic. However, there is one spell without limits, Earth Control. Verdun activated this spell, and everything around him was subjected to the effects of excess energy. The knights cried out that the earth had begun to shake. First monsters, now an earthquake. Enoch ordered them to remain calm and not leave their positions, because this was the magic of their mage, Asher. After the magic was cast, the situation on the battlefield changed slightly. Enoch said that it was difficult to remain calm in such circumstances. The people found themselves on a small plateau in the middle of a huge pit. The monsters tried to attack the plateau, climbing up it by any means possible. Asher activated the third circle spell, Fireball. The monsters below were subjected to a fire attack. Perrick said that monsters burn well. Enoch told Perrick to stay calm. Perrick added that he enjoyed watching the orcs burn. The third level spell, Fireball, has no limit to its expansion. However, there are no mages who use this spell as their main one, as it requires an incredible amount of mana. These costs do not justify the result. Verdun thought that if he had enough mana, the spell would be more powerful than a third level spell. However, this was beyond his capabilities. The huge orc continued to devour the goblins, so even despite the fire, it remained alive. Asher said that if this monster did not want to burn, then he would have to use the wave skill against it. Holding the newly acquired staff in his hand, Asher jumped off the plateau straight towards the monsters. Multi-ice arrows were activated, and the winter hurricane skill was used. The protagonist decided that he had to freeze this monster until it was completely stiff, leaving it no chance of escape. The double spell, Arrows of Bitter Cold, was activated. The protagonist decided that even if this monster was capable of infinite regeneration or was immune to pain, it would be unable to move while frozen. The Ice Sphere skill was activated. The monster was captured. The magical city of Virent. The interlocutors, sitting on the veranda with a cup of tea, discussed the latest news. The young man said with surprise that the magic tower had closed. Now he had definitely seen everything. They say that the tower's energy source exploded. The elderly interlocutor asked if the young man believed this. Most of the magicians had perished, and the tower itself had ceased to function. The extent of the damage was too great for the explosion of the source to be the only cause. The man said that it was divine punishment or that someone had orchestrated the explosion. One of the surviving magicians claimed that they had managed to prove the theory they were investigating. Did letters come from the tower while they were in practice? The man said that someone must have planned to seal the Bogomern magic tower, as the mages themselves would never have done such a thing. He had heard that secret experiments were being conducted in its underground laboratory. Perhaps that was the reason. The magician heard the man's words and grabbed him by the collar. He demanded that the man repeat what he had said. The mage turned out to be a girl. She asked the man what had happened to the magical tower of Bogomern. The people celebrated the safe return of the squad. After subduing the bandits, they returned to the territory of Payet. The Baron held a banquet to celebrate this occasion. The Baron told the participants that they had done an excellent job. It was a miracle that no one had been killed. But where had Asher gone? Our hero put on a suit appropriate for the occasion and said that he was a little late. The Baron replied that the mage had arrived just in time and could now drink some wine. The participants thanked the Baron. No one expected that even ordinary soldiers would be invited to the banquet. Asher said that they had defended this territory, and what did status matter in such a case? The Baron asked Asher about the defeated bandits, wondering if they were too strong for ordinary robbers. Asher admitted that they were nothing like the thugs he had known before. The protagonist thought that with such a high level of skill, they could have lived comfortably doing something else. The Baron said that Asher was right. According to the investigation, these people had a gold rank among adventurers. However, about 2 years ago, one of them killed his comrade and fled. After that, their whereabouts became unknown, but apparently they formed a gang and ended up here. Gold rank is the 4th highest among adventurers. It can only be obtained after many achievements. Our hero was not surprised that a reward of 10 million elks had been offered for them. Now it was clear why the Baron looked so pleased. After all, if Asher had not participated in this expedition, there could have been many more victims. The Baron said that the young man not only destroyed the bandits, but also dealt with the half-humans in place of the fallen adventurers. The Adventurers Guild also sent their gratitude. Asher became the pride of this territory. Baron Pate said that wine had a strong effect on him. Asher thought that the Baron had drunk too much. Pate added that thanks to the young man, the villagers kidnapped by the bandits had been freed. A dignified funeral was also held for the victims. Pate suggested that everyone raise their glasses to Asher, the mage who had saved the Pate territory. The banquet that followed was completely different in atmosphere from what the young man had seen earlier in the Magic Tower. It was a celebration where everyone had fun together, regardless of status. In the Magic Tower, everything was different. The warm and friendly attitude of the locals deeply touched our hero. This was the first time since escaping from the tower. Verdun could laugh heartily. All this time, no one yet realized what changes the destruction of the Magic Tower would soon bring. Rovelin approached the tower and saw that it was intact and undamaged. Were the rumors exaggerated? At that moment, someone called out to the girl. A young man asked Rovelin if she had just returned from Variant. The girl confirmed this and added that she had heard about the energy source that had gone out of control and destroyed the area. However, everything looked better than she had expected, and this brought her relief. The young man said that the building could be quickly restored. Rovelin asked where Verdun was now. The young man pointed in the direction where people were gathered and said that he was there. People were studying a list of missing persons. Rovelin approached him and saw Verdane's photo among the others. She thought it was impossible. The list said that the young man had disappeared while on duty in the power room. Rovelin wondered if that meeting had been their last. The girl burst into tears. She didn't want to part like this because this guy was like family to her. The man put his hand on the girl's head and told her to stop crying. Anger towards others won't change anything. Rovelin raised her head and saw the head of the Balrog Tower in front of her. The girl asked what had actually happened in the tower. Balrog said that during the festival, the energy source had failed. All the mages in the Corps, including the officer on duty, had died. Years of accumulated data and research records were all destroyed. Everything that had been acquired through backbreaking labor. Even the magic circle of the treasury was damaged, leading to irreparable losses. Everything in the treasury, a collection of spellbooks and artifacts, was gone. The damage was impossible to estimate. However, the most important loss was experimental subject number 77. If they could bring his brain back, they could restore the lost records and achievements. The head of the tower said that at least they could take revenge. Although they had missed the main culprit of the power surge, they had a lead. Rovelin asked what the head of the tower meant. Balrog said that 3 hours before the power surge, someone had disappeared without a trace. All connections had been used to track down this person's whereabouts and past. Balrog handed the girl a pendant and said he had found it. Rovelin saw the symbol of the Dark Hour in front of her. The Dark Hour is a group that not only secretly studies magic, but also seeks to subjugate the world with its help. But what are they doing here? The chief said that they did not know how these people had entered the tower and caused the energy surge, but they were sure that they were involved. Balrog said that in order to appease those who had died, he intended to create a team to destroy the Dark Hour. The man added that a place had already been reserved for Rovelin in this group. Balrog noticed that, judging by the expression on her face, the girl had already made her decision. Rovelin crushed the pendant she had found in her fist in anger and thanked the head of the tower for waiting for her. A few days later, the Explorers Guild arrived in the territory of Pite. The visitor apologized to Sir Asher for the incident. The young man said that they had assessed the threat from the orcs as high, so they sent gold-ranked explorers, but the results were disastrous. Asher acknowledged that it was a simple accident. The visitor thanked the mage for his understanding and left a certificate of reward for this conquest. The reward took into account the risk and delivery of the body of a new type of orc. The total amount was 24 million elks. After taxes, half would remain. The visitor said that for independent individuals not registered with the guild, all rewards were subject to a tax of half the fee. Even if they wanted to refuse, they couldn't, as it was imperial law. Violation could lead to charges of tax evasion or theft. The guild representative said he knew a legal way to avoid the tax. Asher guessed that he would be offered to become an adventurer. The visitor confirmed that the young man was correct. Their guild had low tax rates for the highest ranks. Asher could start at the silver rank. Verdun thought that this might limit his future actions. However, he agreed. There was something more important than money. He wanted to become stronger in order to take revenge. Despite the fact that Verdun had lived as a test subject in the tower for 7 years, his essence remained that of a mage. The warehouse of the Adventurers Guild Seekers on the territory of Pate. A mage is always a seeker of secrets and an explorer. That is why our hero brought the body of the defeated orc here for full-scale research. This guild had an artifact that preserves the state of everything it covers. The orc's reddish pupils and skin did not surprise the young man. His torn mouth and more powerful physique compared to other creatures stood out. However, these features are far from those seen in more developed species, such as orc warriors or orc lords. His intelligence cannot be called exceptional either. Most likely this is a mutation rather than evolution. However, even if it is a mutation, there is insufficient evidence to explain its regeneration and incredible strength, achieved solely through nutrition. Verdun noticed a scar on the back of the monster's head. Regeneration is the ability to restore the body to its previous state. This orc's regeneration was strong enough to restore his burned body and even torn flesh, but it couldn't cope with one wound, leaving a scar. Verdun thought that if that was the case, then the orc must have gained its regenerative abilities after being wounded. The scar was a mark left by the cut. Only evolution could help half-humans acquire abilities after birth. The most likely conclusion was that someone had artificially created this orc, and that was very bad. Asher told the knights that they shouldn't have come here to see him off. Perrick replied that the mage had saved his life. It was the least he could do. Asher said he had received too much. A circulation ring, a beast skin cloak, an increase in mana, and its regeneration speed. Enoch told Asher to relax because it was a well-deserved reward that rightfully belonged to him. Perrick said goodbye, adding that if Asher visited a branch of Conrad's trade guild in another city, he should just mention his name. The mage would not regret it. A border village between the territories of Payet and Martes. Verdun canceled flight mode and descended to the ground. After studying the map, the young man realized that this was the only territory between them. If he stayed here for the night and went to the city tomorrow, it would be perfect. Verdun saw two people talking and thought that there might be some useful information here. He decided to eavesdrop a little and find out what was going on. The Whisper of the Wind skill was activated. One of the interlocutors said that the problem was definitely with the goblins. After all, they had stolen all the livestock, and they had to pay a lot of money to hire adventurers, even though they claimed they could handle it themselves. The other person added that someone might get hurt. Asher continued to stand and listen. One of these people said that subjugating the goblins was the adventurer's job, and that by tomorrow morning everything would be over, so there was no point in complaining. Their services were expensive. Verdun wondered if the goblins were really here. To ordinary people, they are just insects. They start with petty theft, but when there are many of them, they attack villages, steal goods, and eat people. Therefore, when goblins are discovered, the standard response is to call in adventurers. Verdun thought there was nothing unusual about that. One of his companions asked if the rumors that James had seen a monster in the forest were true. Another remarked that the village elder had forbidden them to talk about it. This was a few days ago. James went to check the trap he had set in the forest. A wild beast was caught in the trap. James heard the squeal of a wild boar and turned around. James saw a goblin with a torn mouth, larger than a normal orc. It was devouring the boar. Verdun did not expect to hear such a thing. A large goblin with a torn mouth. The young man thought it was difficult to accept this as a coincidence. The goblin was killed by an arrow that hit him right in the eye. It was the work of hunters who happened to be in the nearby forest. Myrna, a silver-ranked adventurer, asked with a bow in her hands if she had gotten better at shooting. Loke, a silver-ranked adventurer, sighed meaningfully in response. Loki said that Myrna was bragging about hitting a target that was really close. The other adventurers asked the two to stop arguing. They were on a mission after all. Iris asked Mild if he had found any traces of goblins. Mild pointed and said that there was a cave that looked like a goblin lair. Iris noted that it was a totem made of animal and human bones, a symbol of the highest species of hobgoblins. They should be careful to ensure everything went smoothly. Iris added that the first thing to do was to destroy all the warning devices and totems before entering. The Mage Iris activated her piercing gaze skill. Now all the adventurers could see perfectly in the dark. Iris noted that even without a lantern, they were no longer afraid of the darkness. Loke said that this was to be expected from a leader. She could always be relied upon. The young people cautiously entered the cave looking around. Iris looked back, and Myrna asked what was wrong. Iris replied that she thought she had sensed mana. Deep inside the cave, goblins worshipped a sacrificial fire containing the bones of creatures they had destroyed. Suddenly, one of the goblins was pierced by an arrow shot from a bow. The arrow pierced his head and he fell backward. The adventurers rushed at the goblins with cries. Myrna said that everything was going smoothly and that they would probably finish quickly. Iris warned Myrna not to let her guard down. The adventurers saw the entrance to another room in front of them. What did this mean? Myrna said it might be the hobgoblin's lair and went to check it out. Iris reminded her that if anything happened, she should give the signal. Myrna went further and saw many destroyed goblins. Who had done this to them? Loki followed the girl and asked what had happened there. Myrna heard something that sent a chill down her spine. The young people saw a monster eating its younger brothers. Goblins. The adventurers were stunned. A giant monster was devouring its own kind. Was it some kind of mutant? No one had mentioned that they might encounter something like this. Now, they needed to focus on destroying this mutant. If it was alone, they could handle it. Iris explained the plan of action. Iris said that Myrna would attack the monster's right eye, Mild and Loke would distract the creature, and she herself would finish off the monster. Myrna crept as close to the monster as possible and took aim with her bow. The arrow flew out and hit the right eye right on target. Blood spurted in all directions, and the monster screamed in pain. Loke jumped at the monster and struck it on the head with his sword. At that moment, Iris activated her mana explosion skill. Magic circles were used. The wounded monster grabbed the nearby goblin's body with its huge hand. It swung its arm and the goblin flew towards Iris. Loke was surprised. Did it really throw the goblin? He shouted at Iris to duck immediately. Unexpectedly, the air rail skill was activated, and the flying goblin collided with an obstacle, changing its flight path. The goblin's body hit the cave wall next to the adventurer, leaving a huge bloody stain. At that moment, Myrna fired several more shots from her bow, and all the arrows hit the monster's head. The monster lost its footing and collapsed to the ground. Myrna ran up to the commander and asked if Iris was okay. The girl replied that she was fine. Iris thought that if the goblin had hit her, she would have surely died. However, the trajectory of the body changed during flight. How was that possible? Myrna said that in any case, the mission was accomplished and no one was hurt. They had to hurry to the village to receive their well-deserved reward. At that moment, someone was watching the adventurers from the depths of the cave. Verdun, who was nearby, thought, "It's good that everyone is safe." He decided that it was worth using his invisibility to watch what was happening. Thanks to this, he noticed one of the laboratory's research objects. All the objects the protagonists had encountered since escaping the tower had one thing in common: a wide mouth resembling a jester's smile. However, this goblin was different from most. Unlike the others, it did not possess increased physical strength and did not regenerate. It did not become stronger by devouring its fellow creatures. Perhaps it was just a large goblin or an unsuccessful experiment. Iris decided not to leave, but to check if any of the goblins were left. She told Myrna to watch the surroundings while Loke and Mild chose other paths. Verdun noted that the girl mage had a good sense of mana and knew how to lead a squad. She had sensed his mana before entering the cave. He thought it was good that she couldn't track him down. Suddenly, another person appeared in the cave. He said, "Did someone come here while I was away?" Iris noted that this man did not seem like an adventurer. Who was he? He should not come any closer, or she would use a spell. The man apologized for not introducing himself right away. He said he was the guardian of this place, the very place they had destroyed. The stranger said that the monster shouldn't have been so active, However, he even managed to build a totem, thereby attracting attention. Brain manipulation wasn't enough to completely subdue his instincts. The stranger asked if the adventurers had noticed anything strange about this goblin, any unusual behavior. The stranger concluded that, judging by the adventurer's silence, this monster was simply larger than usual. If the professor found out about this, he would be extremely upset. The man said that what was done could not be undone. It was better to start with what could still be fixed. That meant that all these adventurers had to die here. Iris asked if this guy really meant that he was ready to fight them alone. The stranger confirmed this. Because of them, this specimen had died, and the experiment had been limited. Even if that hadn't happened, there was no guarantee that they wouldn't tell anyone about what they had seen and about the cave itself. Iris asked what would happen if they promised not to tell anyone anything. The stranger replied that he was not interested in their guarantees. In any case, he was not going to let them go. The villain drew his sword from its sheath and said he really wanted to hear their screams. He asked which of these adventurers was ready to die first. Someone said that only this guy would die here. The stranger laughed and said that it was just bravado. However, he immediately tensed up because the voice came from behind him. Who could have said that? The voice said that it was this guy who was trying to show off and appear tough when he said he wanted to hear their screams and asked who was ready to die first. A protagonist appeared between the adventurers and the stranger. The young man said that he wasn't going to interfere if this man hadn't crossed the line. The man in black was indeed ready to destroy all the adventurers. Verdun noted that this stranger called the goblin a test subject. He also mentioned someone behind the scenes whom he called a professor. Verdun decided that this was undoubtedly related to the Jokers, monsters with slit mouths. The stranger asked who was standing in front of him. Verdun replied that he did not consider it necessary to answer that question. The villain said that it would not change anything. This guy would still be destroyed and die by his hand. Verdun used the multi-fire arrows skill and directed the attack at the villain. At that moment, a mana pulsation occurred, and the opponent was blown back by the shock wave. Verdun realized that his opponent had increased movement speed. He had definitely become stronger with the help of energy. His sword strikes were lighter than those of the knight from Pite. However, his speed was significantly superior to theirs. It would not be possible to end the fight with a single blow. He would have to change his strategy. The villain said that his opponent was using magic too quickly. In that case, he would also have to increase his speed. Verdun activated the skills Winter Wind and Ice Spike. At the same time, he used Double Spell. The villain was surprised. Was his opponent really capable of using the elements of ice and wind at the same time? He clearly couldn't be underestimated. An ice peak explosion occurred, and fragments flew in different directions. The villain said that it looked impressive, but if the attack did not reach its target, it was all meaningless. The stranger in black attacked the hero with a sharp lunge forward with his sword. However, Verdun easily dodged the attack. The adventurers and the villain were stunned. Could an ordinary mage really dodge a sword strike? How did he manage to react so quickly? The villain claimed that his opponent had provoked him into counterattacking. This was not a typical tactic for a mage, but the trick would not work again. Verdun said that in that case, he would fight like a real mage. The adventurers were surprised again. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet shook and began to rise. The adventurers were frightened. How high would it lift them? Iris said it was landscape manipulation. The spell is known for its inefficiency and mana consumption, but this guy uses it in real combat. Iris added that it was a double spell and a quick reading of large-scale magic. His mana reserves must be enormous. This is an extremely rare style of combat. The girl had never even heard of anything like it before. The villain was surprised why his opponent retreated. After all, he said he would fight as a mage. Did he really think that being on top made him untouchable? The stranger in black did not understand why his opponent, having moved to the top, had also moved the adventurers there. Despite the enormous consumption of mana, the villain looked down at his feet. Had the flames melted the ice? The young man thought that even among the Academy's professors, only a few were capable of using this element. The third-level magic Thunder Strike was activated. Who was this guy really? Fire, ice, wind, and now the highest element. Triple spell. Verdun said he wanted to ask one question. In the barony of Pate, there was an orc similar to the dead giant goblin. Were they both connected to this professor? The villain said he now understood why it was so quiet there. Was his rival behind it? The bleeding stranger asked if the young man had come from the Ark. Verdun was surprised to hear about the Ark. His rival noticed this. That meant the young man could learn about it from him. Verdun asked where he could find the professor. He was interested in the experiments he was conducting. The villain thought it would be dangerous to let this guy get to the professor. He decided to make sure they both died here. However, Verdun activated the permission of the Earth's skill. Our hero hoped to find a clue leading to the appearance of the jesters, but in the end, his efforts were in vain. Verdun looked at the adventurers and decided that he needed to finish what he had started. The young man announced that from now on, the adventurers must obey his orders. The adventurers left the cave. Iris approached the young man and said that they had done exactly as he had ordered. They received an additional reward from the village elder. Iris handed her savior a bag with the reward and said that when she threatened to reveal the hidden information about the mutant goblin, the elder paid an additional 1,000,000 elks just to keep them quiet. The leader of the adventurers said that now that their business here was done, they were leaving. Verdun divided the reward equally and told the adventurers to keep a portion for themselves. The young man holding out the bag added that it was their commission. Verdun asked the adventurers to escort him from the village to the city of Martes. After the incident in the cave, Verdun set off for Martes with Iris's team. On the way, the team leader asked about magic and the theory of elements and spells. The protagonist did not object to the conversation and engaged in a discussion with her, and so they arrived in the city. Verdun assumed that a city of this size would surely have a bank. The adventurers needed to submit several reports to the guild. They said that their leader would show the young man around Martes. The girl asked where the gentleman wanted to go first. Verdun replied that he would like to start by collecting his reward and opening a multi-currency bank account. He also needed a card linked to Apple Pay. Iris suggested going to the city hall first and showed him the way. She knew this city like the back of her hand. Mild was surprised. Did Iris really seem so calm? Myrna was also surprised. Was this calm guy the same one who had recently destroyed the man they met in the cave without hesitation? First of all, rewards for captured criminals are issued through the city hall. Verdun headed there. The protagonist almost got into trouble because he didn't have time to create an ID after changing bodies. At the entrance, the guard said that he couldn't pass without proof of identity. At least an ID card was required. Fortunately, thanks to Baron Pate's guarantee, our hero was allowed to enter. At the town hall, the young man was told that the message had already been received. They had heard that he had done something impressive. The owner said that before he left the barony of Pite, Helred had shown him generosity. The young man should accept this as a sign of gratitude for saving Pat, because his family lives on the Baron's territory. Verdun also received an identity card as a gift. Thanks to this, he was able to open a bank account, so everything turned out well. The hero already had an account that he used in Verenta. However, if he used it here, the tower's owner would be able to track him down. He needed to be careful and take precautions. Verdun said he would like it to be made in the form of a staff. The blacksmith said that it would take materials and a little time to do everything properly. It would be ready in 3 days. It was Martis's smithy. The blacksmith handed the staff to the young man and said that he could use it for now. Iris asked if the gentleman preferred staffs or wands. The young man replied that he was used to using staffs when he worked a lot with a broom. The young people approached the building of the Martes Public Library. Verdun asked if there were any books on spells here. Iris replied that there should be such books, but perhaps not at a level that would satisfy the magician. Verdun said that basic beginner-level books would be fine for him. In the large hall of the library, Verdun selected a huge number of books. The clerk said that this was simply impossible. Verdun handed the clerk his card and told him to charge the books to that account and deliver them to the top floor of the Lorix Hotel. The employee asked what books he was referring to. Verdun replied that he was interested in all the books he had selected. The clerk thought it was the biggest sale of his life. Verdun received his reward, opened a bank account, ordered a staff, and rented all the books on magic. Iris said she was very tired. Iris looked at the magician and wondered who this man was. She asked if she had taken him to all the places he wanted to go. Verdun thanked her and said that was enough for today. Iris was surprised. Only for today. The girl remembered that she hadn't asked his name and asked how she should address him. The protagonist replied that his name was Asher. The girl could call him whatever she wanted. Iris suggested they switch to informal terms and communicate informally. Verdun thought that this girl was getting too comfortable too quickly. Iris decided that she had a chance to find out something that interested her greatly. She asked why Asher was in that cave. Verdun pondered how to respond. Should he tell the truth that he had saved them by accident? But that would be strange. He needed to come up with an excuse. Verdun said he had been following the man. Iris thought that sounded plausible. After all, Asher had indeed asked that man about some professor. Could Asher be a secret agent pursuing a shadowy organization? Verdun closed the book and said that he hadn't gained much from it, but it was enough for today. They could go back. Iris said she would walk him out since Asher was here for the first time. Verdun said he didn't mind. After a while, the young people said goodbye. Iris wished him good night and said they would meet tomorrow. The girl sighed with relief, sat down on a bench and said that they were finally done. Asher was indeed a very strange person. Iris thought that he had a very high level of magic because he could control all the elements. Such a volume of mana was impossible to measure. Even at such a young age, Asher has a theoretical understanding that even the professors at the academy don't have. In addition, he is able to explain everything. The girl thought that with such a handsome face, this guy must be very popular. She noticed that when you start talking to him, Asher gets strangely tense. It's almost like talking to a scarecrow. Or maybe he just relies on his looks. The girl blushed with embarrassment. She didn't understand why she couldn't get his face out of her head. However, among all the magicians Iris had met since graduating from the academy and starting work, this guy was definitely the most talented. You don't meet someone like that every day. Iris decided that the next day she would ask him more about elemental magic. Suddenly, there was a powerful explosion behind the girl, accompanied by a burst of bright flames. Iris looked back and saw that the explosion had occurred at the Lorix Hotel. The girl remembered how Asher had said he was staying at the Lorix Hotel. A human silhouette emerged from the flames. Iris thought anxiously, could it be Asher? The boss was informed that Sergen had been killed. The man asked who had killed him. His assistant said that traces of magic had been found in the cave. So someone else had killed him. In a fit of rage, the boss threw a glass of water at his assistant. The man calmed down and told his subordinate not to play dumb. He repeated the question, who killed Sergen? The assistant replied that they had not yet identified the killer, but had found evidence that someone had taken the order from the village. The boss said that this was disappointing. Sergen had been useful. So the test subject had also died? The assistant confirmed this and added that the remains and all traces of Sergen and the test subject had been destroyed. The man said that it was necessary to take care of whoever had destroyed Sergen. The man thought that the two test subjects from the Pite Barony were silent. Now Goblin and Sergen were also dead. The experiment was almost complete. Could it be that representatives of the Ark had noticed them? The lab owner told his assistant not to return until he found and destroyed the person responsible for Sergen's death. The assistant thought he would find the killer, whatever it took. Verdun entered the room with his staff behind his back, reading another book on the way. He was learning the cat's ear spell. The young man was surprised. Is that really how it's done? Earlier, he had wandered around the city all day. Verdun said that the director of magic was indeed ineffective. The man hiding under the bed in the room wanted the young man to go to sleep quickly, and then it would be his last moment. The villain under the bed was surprised at one point. Why had it become so quiet? Suddenly, the Earthbone skill was activated, and the villain was left without cover. Verdun used magic on him. The villain did not understand how he could have been discovered. Verdun used fire magic. The villain ran outside and tried to hide in the crowd. He wondered how this guy was able to cause an explosion right away. Wasn't he afraid of doing that in a confined space? He was definitely at least third level, so it was best to retreat for now. The villain shouted from the crowd that the mage had gone mad and was going to destroy the entire city. The frightened townspeople cried out, was their city in danger? Someone shouted that they needed to scatter in different directions and notify the guards. Verdun watched the crowd, trying to find the killer who had not reacted to the detection of magic. However, he was impatient and made a mistake, as he did not completely hide his presence. Now his existence became even more noticeable. As noticeable as a black hole on a white page. Verdun noticed the fleeing criminal. The villain did not understand how he had been detected. How could this guy sense him? Who had the Ark sent to them? He had never heard of such a monster before. This guy did not care that there were civilians around. He continued to use spells. Verdun activated the magic arrow skill. The villain thought he was dealing with a psychopath. Verdun saw the fugitive run into a building to dodge the attack. Verdun followed him inside. He realized that the fugitive had chosen the house where the gang of homeless people was staying. One of those present asked why our hero had burst in and was causing panic over nothing. Verdun asked where the man had gone. The man said that the young man was very impatient. The homeless man added that if the guy wanted information, he would have to pay for it. Verdun decided that there was no other way out. The fugitive must still be inside. It turned out that the fugitive was hiding behind the homeless man. Suddenly, he stabbed the man with his sword, trying to get to Verdun. The protagonist thought that this scoundrel had destroyed an innocent man and even stabbed him in the back with a sword. Verdun considered this despicable and activated the shockwave skill. The villain lost his footing and flew far back. The criminal thought that magicians usually cannot attack and defend at the same time. If that was the case, he would lure his opponent, use magic barrier, detonate a smoke bomb, and escape. Verdun understood his opponent's intentions and was ready to use magic barrier. The villain realized that his opponent would not use the barrier, but would focus his mana on the tip of his staff. The villain was surprised when he realized that his opponent was his equal in close combat. Could it be that he was facing a combat mage? Verdun delivered a devastating blow, and the criminal flew to the side, coughing up blood. Once again, the Earthbone skill was activated. The villain saw magic circles in front of him. Verdun activated the Whirlwind skill. It was clear that our hero was determined. However, after the dust settled, it became clear that his opponent had fled. Only traces of blood remained on the floor. Then the young man heard someone behind him tell him not to move. He looked back. Verdun saw armed soldiers behind him. The commander said that the young man was under arrest for arson and threatening the local residents in the city. The mayor of Marty's, Henry Decker, said he wanted to summarize the report. Could Asher really be behind the chaos in the city? The officer said that Asher was apparently a victim. Someone had tried to kill him when he returned to the hotel. This led to the clash and unrest. The officer added that this was also related to a recent incident in which someone had tried to kill an adventurer associated with their guild. That was why he had been entrusted with leading the investigation. The head of the Adventurers Guild, Oscar, was present at the mayor's briefing. Henry Decker said he could imagine what impression Asher would have of their city. The mayor asked if the hotel had been badly damaged. Oscar replied that only the upper floor, where Asher had been staying, had been damaged. One wanted criminal from the slums had been killed. The person responsible for this was wanted. The guild leader added that they had also received testimony from the adventurer who had been protecting Asher. The adventurer claimed that while on a honey-gathering mission in the cave, he had encountered a mutant goblin and an armed assailant. Oscar noted that when they visited the scene, there was nothing there. No destroyed bodies, no monsters, not even traces of other creatures. The mayor said that this meant there was an organized group targeting adventurers. Did the guild leader really think that such incidents could happen? Oscar said that this was precisely why he had tried to assign a bodyguard to Asher. Decker asked if there had been any problems with this. The guild leader said that rumors had already spread throughout the city that Asher was the one who had organized the explosion and spread panic. That was why adventurers and soldiers refused to guard him. Decker acknowledged that the situation was complicated and promised to talk to his knights. The next day arrived. Verdun arrived at the town hall. The young man quickly enchanted the staff. Verdun thought that since the equipment was ready, he should start the investigation immediately. A knight entered the room and introduced himself as Jason, the deputy captain of the city's knights. He said that as long as there was a risk of an attack on the mage, he would guard him. Verdun thought that this was because the whole city was in a state of unrest and everyone was alarmed. Verdun assumed that if he had been assigned a bodyguard, it meant that the charges against him had been dropped. However, Jason looked very young, but he was still a third-level knight. Verdun asked Jason if he could go alone. The deputy commander of the knights said that he could only go accompanied by him. Asher replied that he was very sorry, but there was nothing he could do. Jason asked where the mage was going. After half a day, Jason asked where they were going. Asher replied, "What's wrong with that?" The deputy commander of the knights said that with him, you can go anywhere. Jason noted that they had not sat down once since leaving the town hall. How far did they still have to go? Asher replied that they had already arrived. This was the place he wanted to visit. Jason asked why they were here. The next moment, something incredible happened. Using his magical abilities, Asher destroyed the building. Jason was puzzled. Was this guy crazy? He had just blown up a house with magic. The mage said he had come here to find one person. He was interested in the killer who had tried to kill him the day before. Jason was surprised. Was the criminal here? Verdun thought that during the fight with his opponent last night, he managed to touch his shoulder and cast a spell on him. Our hero had recently acquired a spell that connects the target's mana to his own. The spell is called Trace. Verdun thought, if the mark was still there, it meant that the attackers hadn't noticed it. An underground passage appeared before the young people. Jason thought that the power of this mage was simply impressive. Verdun understood that the trail led precisely there. The mage said that judging by the direction and scale, this passage connected to the outer part of the city. Did Jason know about this tunnel? The knight replied that he had no idea, even though he knew all the passages in the city. Jason thought, could this be an unknown tunnel that is not marked on the map and leads outside the city? The knight realized that they had a very big security problem. The officer said they had to close the place immediately. Asher told the bodyguard to wait. The most important thing now was to find the person who blew up the hotel. Jason said that in that case they needed to call for backup. Asher replied that there was no time. The target could get away. They had to follow immediately. Jason thought, was the mage ignoring him just because he was the vice captain? The wounded criminal retreated, following the established route. He felt he had wasted too much time here. After escaping from the mage, he had to heal his wounds and cover his tracks. That's why he had been stuck here for too long. The criminal thought, if this continues, the professor might get angry and try to destroy him. Maybe he should run away? The perpetrator decided that this was a bad idea. The professor would always find a way to get him. He could only hope that the professor would be merciful. The professor said that he was the most famous person in the city of Martes. The professor added that when he came to check if he was dead, the guy had caused a mess. He had created such a spectacle that the mayor and the Adventurers Guild now knew about them. What kind of killer spreads information about his target throughout the district? The professor said he was waiting for an explanation, clear and concise. The young man said that after receiving the order, he immediately went to Martes and checked the transportation department. Then he found out where the man lived and set up an ambush. However, the man somehow sensed him and used a powerful spell. The assassin added that he hid in the crowd and tried to run away, but the mage pursued him all the way. He barely managed to escape using a smoke bomb. The professor asked, does this guy really think he can escape thanks to some strange smoke? The young man suggested that this happened because his escape coincided with the arrival of the knights. Perhaps that was why the guy retreated. The professor refused to believe that the mad mage who used the spell in the city simply gave up because of the smoke and the appearance of a few soldiers. The professor told the young man to take off his armor right away and burn it immediately. The performer was surprised. Why do that? The young man was surprised. Why were there still traces of mana on his armor? He remembered his battle with that mage. Could it be that the guy had cast a tracking spell on him? The professor shouted that they had been discovered. He added that he would now take the sample, and the assistant should destroy everything and seal the entrance. Verdun understood why the connection with Trace had disappeared. The villains had discovered his mark. The protagonist said that unfortunately it was already too late. Verdun looked at the armed young man and thought that he was the same person who had attacked him, judging by his build and posture. So the one standing behind him was the professor. The professor asked if this was really the mad magician he had heard about. The Ark had sent a very strange guy this time. Verdun thought that this was not the first time he had heard of the Ark. The protagonist decided to deactivate these people and then ask them questions. The Earth Spear skill was activated. The professor asked his assistant, where is he going? What are they going to do now? The professor said he had no choice but to continue with the plan. He added that the young man had to buy him time by any means necessary. Verdun said that the professor would not go anywhere. Magical abilities were used, namely the skill Magic Arrow. The assistant said that the professor could not be followed and began to swing his sword. Verdun thought that a weak arrow could be blocked, but if the blow was too strong, it could destroy a person and prevent the truth from being revealed. What should he do? Jason shouted that he would delay the armed man and Asher could follow him. Verdun tried to catch up with the man. Where could he go? The protagonist understood that the professor couldn't have gone far. Verdun covered his nose with his hand. He smelled something strange, a mixture of rot and decaying bodies. The professor said he didn't expect anyone to be able to stop this guy, but he didn't think the young man would show up so quickly. However, he really wanted to show him the results of his work. Behind the professor was a dark cage with glowing teeth and eyes visible inside. The professor asked what the young man could say about these creations. Verdun suggested that these were the very jesters he had seen. There was probably a whole squad of them here. The professor said that these were not jesters to be mocked. This was a new stage of evolution. These were not the most successful specimens as they did not fully reflect his ideals. The professor pressed a button on the remote control he was holding and said that these specimens were still enough to tear any intruder to pieces. The monsters came out of the cage. The professor told the young man to appreciate his work. Verdun replied that he didn't have time and activated the skills Wave and Thunderstrike. This was followed by a doubling of Thunderwave. The monsters that had broken free were deactivated and scattered in different directions. The professor couldn't believe that this had happened. Who was this madman? The man decided that he had been deceived. He thought he was dealing with a simple third-level mage. To do something like this person must be at least fourth level and closer to the upper limit. The professor said he had spent decades completing his research, and now everything could disappear in a matter of minutes. The red button on the wall was pressed, and a unique specimen previously kept in a separate tank was released. The professor said it was time to awaken his masterpiece. Verdun, standing behind the professor, asked what he was going to do. The professor was surprised. Was this guy still alive? The squad was supposed to have destroyed him. Verdun said he had bad news for the professor. He added that he had burned them all. Couldn't he smell the burning? The professor thought that the samples were not perfect. However, one mage cannot destroy the entire squad. It turns out that this guy really is a fourth-level master. Verdun asked the professor, pointing at the monster, who it was. The professor replied that it was his opus magnum, his child. The professor said that it was the devourer, the embodiment of his philosophy. It feeds on flesh in order to evolve. Verdun heard that this was the future of humanity. The villain added that it was the ideal branch of development. The professor reached for the red button. Verdun understood that a confrontation was inevitable. Verdun thought he was literally a second too late. The professor pressed the button before he could prevent it. Verdun thought that the professor was predicting cannibalism for the sake of the future. The young man now understood what the professor was trying to do. The monster prepared to attack the hero. The professor, bleeding profusely, called the young man a mad magician. He added that the boy's mana had marinated the meat to the bone, and his child would taste it. The monster said he wanted to eat. The young man was surprised. Could this monster really talk? The monster shouted again that it was hungry, and added that this man looked delicious and should be eaten. Verdun decided that the creature could be getting stronger. Mages spend years training to perform such tricks. Or they use powerful artifacts. The monster saw no need for that. Verdun understood that the creature would not stop now. The young man thought that the monster had enough skill to carry out endless attacks only in his blind spots. With such a level of skill, it was worthy of being called opus magnum. The monster swung its arms and rushed at the protagonist. The young man managed to activate his defense. With a gleam in his eyes, the hero decided that the devourer was no match for him anyway. The protagonist had one habit. He had lived in Bogomiran for 7 years as a research subject. So the young man had to constantly suppress his rage. Then when he returned to his room after the experiments, he used his accumulated emotions as a driving force and completed his theory of confronting the heavens. Perhaps that is why the stronger he felt, the more anger he spilled out. After that, his feelings ceased to cloud his mind, and he began to think rationally. Verdun thought that the professor's work was indeed better than his. The devourer, as the professor himself called him, possessed physical abilities on par with the orc jesters of Pite. This monster regenerates in much the same way as jesters. However, the devourer's flexibility and speed are much higher. The protagonist attacked the monster with his staff. The devourer jumped aside and was hit by the earth spear. The young man said it was a trap, and the monster fell for it so easily. A magic arrow was also fired at the monster. Verdun thought that any knight could defeat it. The devourer cannot distinguish even the simplest feints. It just swings its fists, even though it has plenty of strength. At one point, the earth spear pierced the monster's body through and through. The young man decided that it was a humanoid beast. Verdun noticed that the creature was too weak to be called the best creation. The professor couldn't understand. How was this possible? How could his opus magnum have lost? This creature acquires the traits of its prey through absorption. In this way, it continuously becomes stronger. The professor believed that his creation was a man of the future, a non-human. And yet it fell so ingloriously in this battle. The professor decided that his child had only just awakened. The child was still hungry and could not use its full power. If he had another chance, he would feed it to restore its strength. Then it would be possible to destroy this magician and escape. Verdun said that given the structure of the facility and the remaining traces, there must be records. He asked the professor where the experiment records were. Verdun told the professor that if he didn't hand over all the findings, he would have to destroy the monster right there. The professor agreed to do so. He assumed he had been given another chance. If this guy was also a mage, seeing the records might make him spare his life. The professor handed the young man a huge notebook and said he didn't mind him looking at it. These manuscripts contained the entire value of his cruel research. Verdun immediately opened the notes and familiarized himself with the contents. A few seconds later, the young man threw the notebook on the floor and said he didn't need it. The professor asked what the young man thought he was doing. He said that from a biological point of view, these studies were of the highest value. Except for ethical violations, they could even compete with the magic tower of Bogomir. Verdun said that he had completely different views. Moreover, the plan described at the end of the manuscripts could cost humanity dearly. The professor was surprised. Would this magician simply destroy him and these people? Verdun said that if the professor told him what the Ark was, he might reconsider his decision. The protagonist thought that Jason was already on his way here, so there was no time. If he wanted to avoid complications, he had to finish everything here. Verdun told the professor that it was time for him to disappear. The professor said that he hadn't finished his work and needed more time. Verdun activated the flames and set the professor and his creation on fire. Jason burst into the room and asked if Asher was okay. The magician replied that he was fine and asked if Jason had dealt with the killer. The knight smiled and said that he had dealt the killer a heavy blow to the side. Verdun thought that Jason had probably just left. Among the records provided, our hero saw a map with a certain place marked on it. Verdun assumed that, judging by the terrain, it was somewhere near Martes. Our hero was intrigued by the red mark on the map. What did it mean? Suddenly, Verdun grabbed his head. The young man felt a sudden headache and loss of strength. These were symptoms of mana depletion. Several days had passed since the professor's defeat. Peace had returned to Martes after that incident. Henry Deeker was furious after confirming the professor's plans and the existence of the underground passage. As a result, the city's knights were put on alert. The troops conducted a thorough inspection of the city and strengthened security measures. The commanders announced that they would search for new passages and close any they found. However, this no longer concerned our hero. Now the young man was preoccupied with injections of stimulants to expand his mana circulation. Thanks to the injections, which affected the capabilities of his body, the protagonist reduced the years of training required for a mage to a few weeks. Verdun decided it was time to move on to the next stage. The young man had reached the middle of the third rank in Verdun's elementary magic system. The boss sitting on the throne asked, "Was the professor really dead?" The man added that he had been thinking about dealing with him for a long time. Now the professor would no longer annoy him. The man said that the professor had been destroyed by the mysterious Asher. He would have to meet him in person. Verdun arrived at the Martes Knights training ground. This place had been marked under the professor's guidance. It was an old abandoned research center. The center was located in a forest on the border of Martes. It was hidden under a massive tree. There was an entrance that could only be accessed after unlocking a mechanical device. Inside, apart from rats and insects, no significant life forms were found. The only thing they managed to find was an emblem in the form of fangs, which the professor had mentioned in his diary. They also found the skin of a mangacap, known for its high physical endurance. There was no information about a group called the Ark, or those involved in breeding non-humans. Nevertheless, the protagonist got his hands on the valuable mangacap skin and managed to prevent a catastrophe in Martes. The young man considered this a good result. Jason said that the mayor was looking for the mage. Deeker told our hero that he owed him. Asher replied that it was nothing. The mayor said that thanks to the terrorist plan that Asher had uncovered, they were able to catch the remnants of the group hiding in the city. However, they did not obtain any significant information because all the criminals were madmen manipulated by the notorious professor. Deeker said that he had kept the young man's contribution a secret, even though it was significant. The young man agreed because otherwise the citizens would have panicked. Verdun thought that reputation was important and that he needed to build his own if he wanted to earn money and gain experience. When he was recognized as the mage who saved the city, he would probably have more opportunities as in the territory of Pate. However, the reason the mayor agreed to keep this incident a secret was because it was a repository of rare items. These items were acquired directly by the city or by criminals. Verdun was surprised when he realized that it was a repository of magical items. The young man understood that he could receive a much more valuable reward for his efforts than just money. In this repository, one could find a skillfully crafted mithril sword that could be easily charged with mana. There were also high-quality weapons and magical artifacts. The mayor said they had everything. Asher could take his time and choose what suited him. Verdun thought that there were many opportunities to earn glory, but the chance to obtain such rare magical artifacts was rare. Verdun asked the mayor if he could appraise them. Diker replied that he was impressed because the young man was a mage, but he was able to understand the value of an artifact. Verdun noticed the Staff of Escape, which could increase the speed of spells. Our hero was also interested in the magic cloak, which changed resistance to physical attacks and fire. There was also a ring of restoration, which increased regeneration after injuries. Everything was useful, but there was nothing of personal value to our hero. However, the young man was intrigued by an unusual ring. "What is this?" he asked the mayor. The ring did not respond to appraisal, so it was probably not a magical item. Diker told the young man not to rush, as he had plenty of time. Evening came. The mayor said it was time to make a decision. Verdun showed the necklace of protection and said he had chosen it. It was an automatic mana barrier. The mayor said it was a good choice, but wouldn't the necklace require more mana than creating a barrier by hand? Verdun said that wasn't a problem for him. Diker thought that letting the young man go with just that was a little cruel on his part. The mayor decided to give the mage the ring he had recently been looking at as well. Verdun was surprised. "Am I really allowed to take both items?" The mayor said that he was the hero of this city. Another trinket was just a trifle. Verdun said he planned to stay in the city for a while longer. He needed something very important: the territory of the Viron mine. Workers with pickaxes in their hands were breaking rocks. Suddenly, during the excavation, the workers came across a skull. One of them was frightened. His colleague asked why he was panicking. "Have you never dug up bones before?" The worker replied that it looked very strange in this place. "It seems that something is wrong with this skull. Why does it look intact?" The worker kicked the skull with his foot and said that it would be better that way. His colleague said it was time to grab a pickaxe and get back to work. They had to finish today. One of the workers asked his colleague what was behind him. The man replied that there was nothing behind him. However, the same cracked skull was looming there. The skull made strange noises and glowed unnaturally. Suddenly, undead creatures appeared in the mine and attacked the workers. The frightened workers shouted that they had to leave the mine. However, the undead were armed, and the workers were unable to escape to the surface. They were destroyed. After that, rumors began to spread that undead creatures had appeared in the mines of the Viron territory. With the appearance of creatures that could not be destroyed, a state of emergency was declared in Viron. Testimonies spread from survivors who had managed to escape from the mines. The entire territory was plunged into fear. Meanwhile, the tragic story of Viron began to spread by word of mouth. At some point, a messenger from Viron also arrived in Martes. Thus, the news reached our hero. Verdun, experimenting, asked Iris, "Is this an example of a correct magic spell?" The girl confirmed and added that now they had to try to move quickly together with him. It took the young man a whole month to learn this spell. A month had passed since the professor's destruction. All this time, Verdun had been learning magic from Iris. During a practical lesson, when he encountered an orc, our hero practiced the skills increase strength, increase reaction speed, and enhance senses. Verdun jumped over the orc, swung his staff, and activated the barrier spell skill. Our hero had finally reached the level where he could use all these skills in battle. Iris said it was simply incredible. The mage defeated the orc with his bare hands in just 13 seconds. Looking at our hero, Iris thought that this guy could handle anything. Verdun said that these lessons had definitely paid off and thanked the girl. Iris said that Asher was simply amazing. He could have learned all this on his own. Verdun replied that he had no books left and was experiencing stagnation. If it weren't for Iris, he wouldn't have been able to learn spell magic. Iris thought that despite his skills, this young man was modest and handsome. Are there really such wonderful people? He is simply ideal. He has all the advantages. Why is he not interested in romantic relationships at all? Iris asked, "Does Asher have a problem communicating?" The young man turned around and said that he did not have such a problem. Iris thought that he had just read her mind. Asher noticed that everything was written on the girl's face. Iris cried out that there had been a misunderstanding. The head of the Martessa Adventurers Guild, Mr. Oscar, greeted Asher. He said he had a request. Oscar was conducting an investigation when our hero was falsely accused. The reason Oscar was looking for the mage may be that hordes of undead had appeared in the mines near the territory of Viron, which borders Martes. Their numbers were so great that help was needed. Rumor has it that contact with the undead causes curses and diseases, so no adventurer agreed to help. Then Oscar learned that Asher had dealt with the professor and came to him. Verdun didn't really want to get involved, but he was out of money. The protagonist decided to take advantage of this opportunity to improve his reputation, so he agreed. Those watching the mage noted that he also trained in close combat with a staff or spear. Not only did he look good, but he was also in excellent physical shape. Verdun said he had heard strange rumors. Did Iris know about them? The girl replied that she had heard nothing. However, in reality, Iris knew about it, of course. In any case, the young man did not expect her group to go too. Was Iris not afraid of the undead? Iris replied that silly rumors about curses did not affect Academy graduates like her. Besides, they would be supporting Asher in the rear, not on the front lines. It was a great opportunity to earn achievements without actually fighting. Myrna thought that, in other words, they were not part of the combat group. The carriage with the squad left the city and moved along the set route to the Viron area. A day had passed since the expedition's departure. The adventurers noticed that Asher had been using flight non-stop since yesterday. Was everything okay with his mana? Why was he keeping his distance from them? One of the girls asked Iris about her relationship with Asher. They seemed quite close. Iris replied that they were like younger and older friends. During their last mission, their group got into trouble. Then Asher suddenly appeared and saved them. After that, they became closer. The girl asked if they were both graduates of the same academy. Iris replied that this was not the case. Asher was more like a mentor, but the age difference between them was small. Asher suddenly jumped into the carriage and said that a horde of undead had been spotted ahead. It seemed that they were pursuing the inhabitants of the Viron territory. The young man said he was going ahead to help the locals. He flew up into the air and headed in the specified direction. It was still quite far from the area of conflict, but there were too many undead. Verdun decided that this was the perfect opportunity for him. Our hero devoted a whole month to magic, spells, and it. It was time to see the results. Among the treasures the young man stole from the Tower of Magic was a grimoire. Only third-level mages and above can use it. However, even simply opening this book increases the caster's magical power. It is a rare item that all mages desire. Only the master of the magic tower can create it. This requires expensive materials, so only a limited number of grimoires are made. Most of them are already in use, which makes them ineffective. The one our hero brought is an unregistered grimoire of elemental magic. The young man engraved a complex, permanently bound magic circle called Connection in it. Now, his first real test after completing his connection with this grimoire is geographical manipulation. After an intense attack, the bones of the undead scattered in different directions. The frightened adventurers also left this location. Verdun used the skills Air Road, Flame, and Double Spell. Then there was an explosion, and the undead were destroyed. Everything was set on fire. The adventurers, watching our hero, noted that he had been using flight since yesterday, and he still had enough energy to use such spells. Verdun thought that the spell he had recorded in the grimoire was an earth element spell. Perhaps it was the result of the combination of the enormous mana of his altered body using superiority over the sky. Iris thought that Asher was already beyond the 4th level. Definitely, these were not the skills of a 3rd-level mage. Iris looked back and saw undead approaching her from behind. The girl screamed loudly in fear. Suddenly, a huge warrior in platinum armor with an axe appeared. He destroyed the undead and asked where all his loot was. The warrior said he didn't understand anything. Could someone explain it to him? The warrior asked in surprise why everyone was silent. He repeated the question. Where was his loot? The warrior with a platinum pendant on his chest shouted for an answer, and not to test his patience. Iris immediately realized that she was facing a warrior nicknamed Butcher Galliarch. But why was this man here? The girl replied that all the undead had already fallen under their blows. The butcher was indignant because there were dozens of them. When they were far away from here, a message came about the horde of undead. There must have been quite a few of them, but now he learns that they have all been destroyed. The butcher looked at the mage and thought, could this guy have done all this? The butcher asked the blonde-haired young man if it was his work. Verdun replied in the affirmative. The butcher said it was very rude to answer that way. He came here because he was hired to hunt these undead. The undead were his prey, and this mage simply stole his job. The butcher said that the young man had interfered with his work, so it would be better if he paid him. Verdun, with a glowing staff in his hand, calmly looked into the eyes of this brute. Verdun asked how much the guy thought he should be paid. The butcher noticed that his opponent had suddenly increased the distance between them. He had probably chosen a position for battle, as befits a mage. The butcher was puzzled. Did this young man really intend to fight him? The bully's eyes lit up, and he said that in that case, he was ready to have some fun. The adventurer told the mage not to act foolishly. He would not be able to fight the butcher. Iris also said that this man was dangerous. However, dangerous was an understatement. He was strong and had a violent temper. Several years ago, he got drunk and started a fight in a tavern. He crippled a knight who was simply trying to stop him. Iris said that this was a serious crime. How could a drunk knight cripple a man? The adventurer said that the guild did not punish the butcher at all because they needed such a warrior. Gode, a mage from the Galliarca group, said it would be unreasonable to expect the usual rules to apply to someone like the butcher who has a platinum rank. The guild is well aware of this fact. Narian, a fighter from the Galliarca group, told Gode to stop explaining everything to them. They had to try to stop the butcher. If their destination was Viron, it could become a real problem in the future. Gode agreed that in that case, they shouldn't make the situation worse. Gode told Galliarch to calm down. These people are probably just carrying out an order from Viron. Gode added that if Galliarch fought, it could lead to big problems in the future. Galliarch noted that they could just kill all these adventurers and say they were ambushed by undead. Gode told our hero that he seemed very confident in his abilities. Gode added that he wants to show this guy his place and used his magical abilities. Verdun realized that magical pressure was being used against him. It seems that this guy is, at best, a third-level mage. The name sounds majestic. Few would argue with that. But it's just a technique in which he releases raw mana. However, it had an effect on some people. Verdun was surprised. Was his opponent really ready to use it in real combat? Verdun looked at his opponent and attacked him energetically in turn. Gode staggered and, unable to stay on his feet, fell to his knees. Galliarch thought, did this guy interrupt the magical pressure and knock Gode out? But Gode is a good mage. Galliarch realized that this guy was much stronger than they had expected. The butcher asked the young man his name. The protagonist replied that his name was Asher. The young man added that they would meet again in Vero. The clash with Galliarch's group ended sooner than expected. The expedition entered the city. Murta's team, tasked with protecting the surviving members of the royal family, was delayed on their way to Viron. By entering into conflict with Galliarch, Verdun incurred the displeasure of part of the group. The next day, Lord Viro, Mr. Farned van Viro, thanked the guests for responding to the call. An order was given to proceed to the mines of Viron. Viron's troops participated in this expedition. The goal was to destroy the suddenly appearing army of the undead. The Order of Loas also took part. A group of adventurers led by Galliarch also set out for the mines. The butcher promised that there would be no casualties among them. Galliarch asked the leader of the detachment, Martes, if he was nervous. The adventurer told Asher not to try to fight the butcher. The young man promised, but only on the condition that the butcher didn't start first. The battle had already begun. The commander said that if the undead had a physical form, it was necessary to aim for the head. If you hit them in the middle, they would regenerate. Priests and mages had to support from the back line. Suddenly, the bloody golem appeared among the opponents. The priest shouted that it was necessary to retreat, otherwise the golem would crush everyone. The commander of the knights said that this golem could not be destroyed with ordinary swords. Galliarch said that the blood golem was perfect for a warm-up and rushed into the attack. With his bare hands, the butcher separated the golem's head from its body. Farned said that he had expected something different from the butcher. The golem was destroyed with a single blow. Galliarch swung his arm and threw the golem's head far away. The monster's bloody head fell at the protagonist's feet. Verdun said that was very rude. The butcher declared that if the young man wasn't going to show his true strength, then what was he doing here? Everything Asher had shown the day before was just tricks. Verdun activated the landscape manipulation skill. The ground beneath their feet shook and began to move. After that, the mage activated the skill Fireball. Iris was frightened and asked what Asher was doing. Myrna said that he was instantly using serious spells one after another. Galliarch said that Asher looked weak, but he still had a core. The butcher added that he definitely liked that. Gromila suggested seeing which of them would prove to be stronger. Galiark rushed to attack the undead and shouted that whoever destroyed more enemies would win. Starting with Galiark's provocation, Verdun seemed to be participating in the competition, scattering the undead left and right. As a result, the main striking force reached the mines of Vero with fewer casualties than expected. Since space in the mines was limited, our hero squad could not go there in full force. Only a few people were selected. Galiark said that Asher fought well. Verdun stated that they were not friends. Galiark said that they fought side by side on the same battlefield, so there was no need to be hostile. Goad wondered what the butcher saw in that guy. Goad, remembering their first meeting, thought that he had failed to use mana pressure back then. However, this guy completely subjugated him with his mana in the blink of an eye. Goad understood that Asher had the same third level as he did. Most likely he was hiding something after all. A message came in that the Virun garrison would be waiting at the entrance. Everyone wished each other luck. At the forefront was a ranger from Galiarka's group. The girl's name was Narienne. She was worthy of the gold rank. She goes first and is the first to see danger, then instantly destroys the undead with surprise attacks. However, she was not alone. All members of the group performed their duties effectively. Such is the true strength of the group. At one point, our hero felt uncomfortable for some reason. One of the knights shouted that they had reached the end of the mine. Verdun wanted to scan the entire mine with a mana detector just in case. But if there were undead nearby, they would most likely be detected. The priest said there was no need to tremble with fear. They must believe in the blessing of Luas, the god of light. Iris asked Asher if something was wrong. The girl believed that if they attacked the enemy first, they would be able to protect everyone. Galiark said that Asher was clearly tense. He also sensed the smell of death. Asher said he couldn't tell for sure, but there was definitely a powerful undead nearby. Asher said that, as annoying as it was, the butcher's intuition seemed to be right. Iris should stay close when the battle began. Iris was surprised. Even Asher was saying this? What awaited them ahead? The young man replied that he did not know yet. One of the adventurers noticed that light was coming from the end of the mine. However, it was not worth jumping in there. Asher said it was getting noisy and asked the knight what was going on. The knight replied that they had been checking for other tunnels and had found light coming from the end of the passage. Asher thought that there should be no other exits from the mine except the one they had come through. Where could the light in the dungeon have come from? Galiark stopped everyone with a wave of his hand and said they shouldn't go any further. The knights wondered, what kind of place was this? It resembled a tomb. An undead creature with a sword in its hand stood atop a pile of bones. On the undead's chest was the coat of arms of the Kingdom of Estria. Verdun is currently hiding his identity as he has escaped from the magical tower of Bogomern. This land is the Duchy of Riviante. The duchy has declared independence from the Kingdom of Estria. It is very strange that the coat of arms of Estria appeared here in Vero, which belongs to Riviante. Goad asked in surprise, are there traces of Estria here in a place like this? Or is everything around him not what it seems? Goad understood that the reason this group trusted him was because of his skills as a spy. Even Galiark recognized this. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. Galiark asked, if they simply destroy this undead, will the threat disappear? Goad said he would do it himself. The butcher was naturally surprised. Goad added that there was no need to bother with such simple undead. He would take care of it himself. The priest activated the purification skill and began to recite a prayer. Verdun thought, if it doesn't live as a knight, then they are dealing with a knight of doom. If it hasn't awakened yet, it can be weakened with purification and destroyed without suffering too much damage. The stone strike skill was activated. The undead's eyes lit up. The undead knight lunged forward with the intention of grabbing Goad, but Galiark reacted in time and grabbed the undead by the arm. Galiark clenched his fist and the bones of the undead's hand remained in his hand. The knight himself ran sharply to the side. Galiark immediately realized that this was no ordinary undead. Could it be the Knight of Doom? The priest said it was a Knight of Mourning. Although weaker than a Knight of Doom as an individual, it had its own strengths. The priest added that these knights can command the undead. Asher said that in that case, their plan was crystal clear. They had to destroy the Knight of Tears. Our hero said that before doing so, he would reshape the landscape in this area to neutralize the enemy's numerical advantage. Galiark asked what Asher was doing now. Did he really want to fight the undead himself? Asher suggested thinking clearly. When they went down there, each of them would have enough enemies to fight. Asher added that Galiark would have something to do. The young man added that in the meantime, he would take care of the main monster, the Knight of Tears. Galliarch and the priest found themselves facing huge skeletons. The Knight of Mourning grabbed his huge sword. The protagonist immediately fired multi-fire arrows at him. As it turned out, the undead are weak to sacred and fire elements. Next, the double spell skill was activated. The young man prepared a wave of fire arrows and thought this was his chance. The fire spear struck the Knight of Tears. The Knight of Tears continued to resist and threw his sword at his opponent. Verdun was surprised. Even after being hit by the fire spear, his opponent was completely fine and immediately counterattacked. Verdun thought that if he continued to behave this way, he would be completely defenseless against the undead. Verdun activated the Breath of the Glacier skill, and the undead was frozen. Now he was limited in his movements. Verdun decided that if fire didn't help him, he would have to crush this knight with brute force. He activated the skill Earth Spear, a triple throw. His mana concentration was at its maximum. The protagonist looked at his opponent and decided that Earth Spear needed to be returned. Verdun thought that his opponent had managed to parry his blow. However, more importantly, the monster had changed its appearance. Verdun was annoyed. Why did his mana run out right now? Galliarch came to the rescue and immediately attacked the Knight of Tears. The butcher shouted that he would not let anyone else take his main dish. After Galliarch's attack, the undead was destroyed and torn to pieces. The knight thought that the entire group had fought against 3 undead creatures. If Narian with her gold rank hadn't been there would have been no chance of survival. Goad said that was a little offensive. Did the knight really think that only Narian was doing anything here? The knight admitted that the mage had also helped. Iris asked if everything was okay now. Myrna pointed upward and said that now was not the time to worry about others. They had to think about how to escape from here. There was no normal way out at the moment. They couldn't reach the ceiling, and they didn't have enough strength to break through the wall. If Asher fell, they would be practically buried alive. However, everyone could hear Galliarch fighting fiercely. The butcher continued to strike the modified Knight of Tears. Asher and Galliarch now faced the Knight of Tears together. The butcher asked if Asher was still able to move. Asher told Galliarch to shut up and replied that he would rather talk about the enemy. The butcher said he liked this walking skeleton. Galliarch said he would start, and Asher should get ready to shoot. The young man replied that he would try. The bruiser attacked the monster, activating mana explosion. Asher approached the fighting butcher and told him to take a step back. Galliarch said that Asher was indeed crazy, turned around and began to run away. Asher activated a powerful explosion aimed at the undead. The modified Knight of Tears was engulfed in flames, but continued to fight. The same pendant glowed on the protagonist's chest. Verdun remembered his conversation with the mayor about the protective necklace. The mayor had said that the necklace would consume more mana than directly using a magic barrier. The young man had been worried about mana depletion before, but subsequently had no problems. Nevertheless, his mana reserves were almost depleted. His left shoulder was dislocated after the last blow. However, the biggest problem was that just before striking his opponent, the monster's body was hidden under black armor. After that, the Weeping Knight became much stronger. The priest tried to block the Weeping Knight's movement. There are no records of such a Weeping Knight in any of the church archives. Galliarch jumped to his feet, shouted for the priest to hold on, and rushed to their aid. The butcher shielded the priest with his back and asked if they really wanted to die together. Goad decided that his chance had come. His attention was focused on the enemy. The mage decided to defeat the Weeping Knight with his spells. Galliarch and Goad exchanged glances and understood each other without words. However, Goad was unprepared and, being attacked by his opponent, suffered serious damage. Galliarch counterattacked the Weeping Knight. The priest shouted that the mage needed to be healed. Galliarch asked Asher how much longer he had to wait. The butcher asked if the mage was going to use a powerful spell. How much time did he need to restore his mana? Asher replied that he would be ready in a few seconds. Galliarch shouted that he would break the armor in the place that had been pierced earlier. Asher had to be ready to cast his magic at that moment. Galliarch shouted that the undead should not move, and dealt a devastating blow to the Knight of Tears. Asher activated his magical abilities, and the attack was successful. Asher and Galliarch realized that their plan had worked. Asher pushed the wounded Galliarch aside and told the monster that he was now his enemy. The young man noticed that the hole in the Knight of Tears' chest had not yet closed. If he concentrated his magic in that spot, he could destroy the monster. Verdun thought that Iris's help would be useful now. Earlier, Asher had told the girl that she had more talent for ice magic. However, she was not yet accustomed to elemental magic. Iris said she would try not to disgrace her teacher. Asher activated the flame and prepared for another attack. He believed that together with Iris, they could win. The young man promised to return to the child no matter how many battles still awaited him. The warrior repeated that he would definitely return to his homeland. He really believed that, but it wasn't entirely up to him. Then he learned something he shouldn't have known. Because of this, all his plans collapsed. He was buried alive. However, he believed that he still had to return. Asher opened his eyes lying on the ground and did not understand what was happening to him. Iris and the priest were delighted. Asher had finally woken up. Asher raised himself up on his hands and asked, "Is the battle over?" The priest said that they had won thanks to Asher. Iris said that they had defeated the knight, but then Asher suddenly lost consciousness. The priest suggested that it might be because of the medallion the mage was holding in his hand. He sensed the same spirit in this medallion as in the knight. The priest said that Asher was holding the medallion so tightly that it was impossible to take it away. Considering the aura, it would be best to give the medallion away. Asher pulled his hand away and said he would take care of it himself. The priest said that anything could happen. Asher replied that he was fine, and there should be no problems. Galliarch laughed and said that the loot turned out to be modest. The priest agreed with him. However, what happened to Gode was much more important. Extraordinary measures were taken in time, and he survived. Asher expressed his satisfaction that Gode had survived. After that, he got to his feet. It was decided to return if the cleanup was already complete. The undead, the commander of the undead, the defeated weeping knight who appeared in the mines of Virun, it was all extremely strange. The Lord was horrified when he learned of this. He hastily gave the order to clean up. Fortunately, none of those who entered the mines were killed. Looking into the undead's memories, our hero felt some unease. This incident clearly showed him one thing: he had definitely become stronger. The young man thought that real battles really did accelerate growth, even though he was still at the 3rd level. However, with the magic book that interrupted the connection and increased mana, he could use spells with an area of effect corresponding to the 4th level. Verdun kept telling himself that if he didn't give up, he would definitely achieve his goal and reach the power level of the head of the Balrog Tower. After all, he had already managed to increase his mana. The priests of the Order of Luas decided to stay and continue watching the mines. The adventurers returned to their respective areas. Galliarch suggested that Asher was not going to become an adventurer or a mercenary. Was he also heading to Grey? Asher asked what they were talking about. The butcher was surprised. Did Asher not know where Grey was? How was he going to make money in that case? Did he think people would just come to him when he became famous? Asher asked, why not? Galliarch called him naive. Simply put, it's like being a shadow information broker. In Grey, information is bought and sold by those whose skills have been proven. They are also the center that organizes requests. Galliarch said that there are many more such people than the young man thinks. People who do not follow the rules but strive for money and fame. Asher asked why Galliarch was telling him this. The big guy replied that they had gone through the flames of battle together and had become comrades in arms. Trapped in the magic tower, the protagonist was unaware of this information. If there are risky orders, there will likely be many opportunities to face strong opponents, which means many chances to become stronger. Iris from the carriage said that they would be leaving soon. The girl asked if Asher wasn't going with them. She wanted to learn more about elemental magic when she returned to the city. Iris asked why Asher was standing aside. He wasn't going to leave them, was he? Besides, his wounds hadn't healed yet. Asher thanked the girl for the magic she had given him. With such training, she would be able to control elemental magic well. However, he really did need to leave. Everything happened very suddenly. Iris realized that she had survived after all. She had also managed to study the theory and magic of the elements, which she had been unable to learn at the academy. She understood that they had met suddenly and were parting just as suddenly. However, Iris did not expect it to happen so soon. She understood that she couldn't ask him to stay. Iris and Asher shook hands and promised to meet again. Iris thought that when they met again, she would strive to be the younger sister that Asher could be proud of. The female mage demanded that the defeated man answer her. Why was the Dark Hour aimed at the magical tower of Bogomern? The Dark Hour was a group of people who had strayed from the path of orthodox magic. Verdun managed to attack their 3rd secret laboratory, but never found out who was behind the attack on the magical tower of Bogomern and why. Perhaps low-level mages are not privy to such details. The young man said it was simply impressive. A simple 2nd-level spell had such destructive power. Locard Maniacs, Valdek's third student, said that people with special abilities are different from others. Did Rovalyn agree with him? Rovalyn reminded him that she had to figure this out for herself. Lucas said he couldn't let her do that. He added that he couldn't put her in danger and let her go alone, because she could become his master's fourth student. Rovalyn told Lucas to focus more on his thesis. 7 years had passed since the publication of The Theory of Multi-Continuity. Many were eagerly awaiting it. But could his talent cause the same resonance as 7 years ago? Lucas noticed that Rovalyn did not believe in the unfounded rumors from the past. The master of the tower himself acknowledged this thesis as his own work. Rovalyn said that it seemed strange. A man with such an impeccable mind had only managed to rise to the 4th rank in 7 years. Lucas was angry. How dare she talk about him like that? Lucas thought that this girl had always been unbearable, and now she was stirring up the past and making accusations. Verdun was dead, so no one would ever be able to reveal the truth that he had stolen the work. However, Rovalyn was becoming bolder every day, but if he acted on his emotions, he risked losing the favor of the Tower Master. He must maintain his reputation and gradually rise to the 5th level. Then the world will be at his feet and he can get rid of Rovalyn. Before leaving Viron, on Galliarch's recommendation, Verdun stopped in the village of Grey. Now he has arrived in Cohen. Known for its industry and manufacturing, this city attracts many who are looking for stable work and value public order. However, due to the living conditions here, there is also a large gap between the rich and the poor. The slums of Cohen are known throughout the duchy as some of the most terrible. Verdun understood that it was in these slums that he had to search. The difference from the main area was striking. Even the slums of Martes weren't this bad, but at least there wasn't an unbearable smell here. Verdun approached the building where he thought he could buy information. Cohen, the tip of poverty. Verdun opened the door and entered the empty establishment. Inside, there was no one but the man behind the counter. The man said that they were not working at the moment and asked the visitor to leave the premises. Verdun said that the butcher had advised him to come here. The owner of the establishment asked the visitor his name. The young man replied that his name was Asher. The man said that the young man looked exactly as he had been described. Since the young man had come on the recommendation of the butcher, formalities would be omitted. The visitor had to go through this door, and then he would find himself underground. The man warned the young man not to cause any trouble if he didn't want them both to get very busy. Verdun descended the stairs and found himself in a storage room. Then the young man entered an underground tavern. The man accompanying him was completely covered in bandages that hid his body. Verdun determined that there were 2 mages, an archer, and 2 swordsmen in the tavern. It seemed that they were all there either to find work or to learn something useful for themselves. A man approached our hero and said he was pleased to meet him. The man introduced himself. His name was Pale, and he was an information dealer in the southern regions. Pale noted that Asher's achievements since arriving in Payet in such a short time were simply impressive. The young man wondered if he had been followed. Pale asked what Asher needed, work or information. The young man replied that he was interested in everything. Pale said that he could arrange an order for the young man. Pale added that information and orders were divided into levels. Our hero found this strange. Why divide them into levels? Pale explained that the value and distribution of information always come with responsibility. As a trader, he risks his life. Therefore, they assess trust, dignity, and abilities. Pale noted that there are no exceptions to the assessment system. Verdun thought that information about the treasures from the Magic Tower was not yet available to him. But he needed money, so he could take an order, raise his level, and gain access to it. The young man asked if he could choose the assignment himself. Pyle said he would provide several options to choose from, but first he had to fill out a questionnaire. Pale suggested that Asher was more inclined toward research than simply swinging a sword. Pale said they had one assignment that would be perfect for the young man. It was not very different from Asher's previous journeys, in which he hunted dangerous creatures. Asher reviewed the assignment and asked if it involved subjugating a half-human. Pyle said that they did have such assignments, but not this time. Pale clarified that the target this time would be a howling wolf. Subduing demonic beasts. Usually such requests come to the guild from an entire country or feudal domain. This immediately reveals the relationship between the country and the guild. This method also helps the country cope with possible damage. Sometimes a feudal lord or ruler directly defeats demonic animals with the help of their troops. In this case, the materials obtained during the battle belong entirely to the initiator of the military campaign, and the guild responsible for distributing information about monsters receives nothing. However, such actions soon lead to the appearance of even more monsters. Without sufficient troops, the domain turns into a lair of monsters. Therefore, unless it is an emergency, it is the guild that has the right of first intervention in matters related to the destruction of monsters. However, the customer always wants to secure the most valuable materials for themselves. The vocal cords of the lowest wolf also fall into this category. Thus, in the end, it is Gray's information merchants who are able to satisfy the appetites of such lords and rulers. After that, the young man accepts requests from such information traders and resolves all issues. He was currently working on fulfilling one of these requests. At the edge of the forest lay the bloodied body of a huge wolf. People approached it. Pale said that the guild had done an impeccable job. Pale looked ahead and saw that not just one individual had been destroyed, but an entire pack. It seemed that this was not a typical third level. The ordinary creatures had been destroyed by large-scale attacks. Now the target was the lowest level wolf. It was being destroyed slowly and thoroughly so as not to damage its vocal cords. The man noted that the hunt had ended 2 days earlier than promised, and the quality of the vocal cords was first class. He added that he was satisfied with everything and that the order could be considered complete. Pale said that they had obtained a sharp arrowhead. The master asked the young man if he liked the set he had made. Asher replied that he liked the new purchase. The young man added that he had come to the right place. Upon arriving in Cohen, Verdun commissioned a workshop to make armor from Mabat's skin. Verdun asked the master if he could order a set consisting of upper and lower parts. The protagonist also asked the craftsman to restore the ring he had received in Mardius. The craftsman said that the ring was a magical artifact and that it was not a simple restoration. The young man took the ring in his hands and felt emotions. The damage was so severe that he couldn't tell what effect the ring had, but it was definitely a magical item. After that, the protagonist stayed in Koken and began receiving requests from Pale. Pale gave orders, Verdun carried out the tasks and received rewards. The requests ranged from capturing wanted criminals and fighting bandits to raiding illegal slave traders. A whole month had passed since the young man arrived in Cohen. Although the ring had been restored, the effect of this artifact remained a mystery to him. Verdun decided that the problem could not be fixed in the workshop and decided to repair it himself. A girl with an ice cream cone in her hand ran past the young man. She stumbled and almost fell. Our hero managed to catch her. The girl's grandmother approached the young man and said that her granddaughter had probably caused him trouble. Verdun replied that everything was fine. He added that the little girl was fine and that he would be on his way. The elderly woman noted that the young man had acted very nobly and that her granddaughter was unharmed. She couldn't let him leave empty-handed. The woman added that although it was not a large reward, it would be useful to the young man. The girl said that her grandmother was very good at predictions. Verdun said he was ready to try once and sat down in front of the woman. The old woman said that she would now see what fate had in store for the handsome magician. The protagonist did not believe in such superstitions. Verdun asked the woman what the cards were saying. The fortune teller said that the young man should continue to live as he was living now. Verdun thanked the woman and said it was time for him to leave. The granddaughter asked her grandmother what cards had been dealt to the magician. The woman replied, "The man means life, the reaper means death, the god means birth." All the cards are in reverse order, symbolizing chaos and a departure from the original destiny. Verdun decided to fix the ring himself, but did not expect to make any progress. In chaos, there are no problems for the future. The young man decided to try for a few more days, but if nothing worked, he would have to turn to a specialist, someone with infinite potential. There was still hope that this potential would not bring darkness into the world. The man looked at the sky and wondered, what kind of star is that? He had been studying astrology for a long time, but he had never seen such a star before. Its meaning was impossible to decipher, and it influenced other stars. The star, which should have fallen long ago, remained in the sky. The fate that was not supposed to disappear evaporated like smoke. The man with the ring on his hand prayed that that star at the edge of the sky would not distort his destiny. After checking the map hidden in the ring, our hero left Cohen and began to move towards the Bard Mountains. The young man set off on a 3-week journey without telling Peel anything about it, as he had no idea where the ring was pointing. Fearing that unwanted people might follow him, the young man traveled by cart or on foot without using magic. Verdun emerged from the forest, looked ahead, and was surprised to see a small town below. The young man thought that his first goal was the nearby forest, so it would be worth hiring a hunter familiar with the area as a guide. Our hero passed by 3 people wearing hoods. Among them was a girl who took an interest in the young man. She said he was just her type. The girl asked the older man if she could leave for a moment. Carden said that she was at it again. The young man told Ferris to be quiet. Until they completed their mission, personal movements were prohibited. The girl asked for just this one time. Carden said that after the mission was complete, Ferris could do whatever she wanted. They needed to find the traitor as soon as possible and destroy him. A man passing by overheard the conversation. He indignantly asked why these people were loitering around and talking about some kind of destruction. Carden replied that Ferris had been very talkative, and now they would have to eliminate this man as well. 4 days later, in the forest near the Bard Mountains, Verdun was warming himself by the fire. The young man couldn't believe that he had been wandering for so many days without achieving anything. The hunter he had taken with him as a guide was exhausted. No matter how much the young man checked the surroundings with his magical senses, he couldn't find anything. Maybe it was time to turn everything upside down. Verdun noticed that after a certain number of meters, trees with a different bark color began to grow. What was the reason for this? Until now, the young man had often flown over them, but had never paid any attention to this. Verdun tried to look at everything from a new perspective. After that, he understood why he hadn't been able to find anything before. The entire forest was a huge magical circle of concealment. Who had set up a barrier of this level? Was the tree in the center of the forest the core of the magic circle? The young man decided to set a time interval of 1 hour. Verdun assumed that he would be able to destroy the magic circle during that time. The old man came to his senses and noticed with surprise that he had passed out again. The man drank the red liquid again. He said that even this potion was now having little effect. However, it was still tolerable. Someone appeared behind him and said that the time would soon come when the world would change. The old man asked in fear who he was. Had he been sent from the dark hour? Verdun appeared in the room. He did not understand why the man remembered them, but his guess was wrong. The young man said that he had come here following the instructions of his ring. The old man saw the ring, said it was crescent, and immediately began coughing up blood. After recovering a little, the man asked where the young man got the ring. Verdun understood that this was no ordinary old man. It was obvious from the fact that a high-level, large-scale magic circle of concealment had been set up in the forest. The old man was somehow connected to this ring. He must remain vigilant. The young man asked why the old man was here. The old man said that the boy was very cautious, and he liked that. He agreed to tell the young man about the ring. The man asked how the young man was able to overcome the barrier, since most of the dozens of entrances were traps. Verdun said that he destroyed the magic circle in 4 hours. The man was surprised. Could the young man really have enough knowledge and skills to solve such problems at such a young age? Verdun asked again what kind of ring it was. The old man said it was fate. Fate had brought them together, even though they had never met before. The man added that he had lost this ring 15 years ago. The old man said his name was Harkin Digest. He was a 5th-level mage, known as a sage for his knowledge of alchemy, magic circles, and astrology. Harkin added that he had one close friend. He had reached the 6th level and proposed founding a society for the study of magic. Thus, the Dark Hour was born. The group started with 8 people, but within a few years there were more than 100. The world both admired and feared them. This was not surprising, as they possessed the power to crush a small country in a full-scale war. Harkin said that his friend did not lead the Dark Hour down that path. Even though they had more work than before, they were still a gathering of student magicians. This continued until his friend died. His friend was destroyed by their student, whom they had raised together. Harkan asked what Dahit was doing. Dahit Vestral said that he was going to take control of the Dark Hour. They were blinded by the talent of a child capable of reaching the 7th level and did not see his true nature. Dahit announced that from that day forward, the Dark Hour belonged to him. By the time they were old, he had already reached the 6th level. Most of the members of the Dark Hour were killed or seriously injured by Dahit or his followers. Harkan added that he managed to escape and save his life, but all his mana channels were severed. The old man noted that over the years, his desire for revenge had not diminished in the slightest, and today this young man had come to him. Verdun asked if the evil deeds of the current Dark Hour were not connected to Harkan. The old man said that thanks to his skills as an astrologer, he was able to foresee the future, but he could not see such events. Harkan added that he had no choice but to wait, because Crescent was the 2nd ring of the pair. It had been lost and was supposed to bring here the one who was destined to save this world from great evil. Verdun said that work of this magnitude should be rewarded with a corresponding price. But what could Harkin offer him? The old man said that if the young man promised to do his will, he would give him everything he had achieved so far. The protagonist found this hard to believe. Was the old man really willing to share all his knowledge? He still faced the wrath of Balrog Besias from the magical tower of Bogomern. It was a matter of personal grievance and revenge. However, the emphasis now was on peace, which was more important than his own revenge on those who had betrayed him. Verdun asked what the old man meant when he spoke of his achievements. A strange sound was heard outside the room. The young man assumed that they had guests. The three strangers entered the room and said that they had finally found the old man. Harkin asked who they were. The man asked the old man if he was Harkin Digest, the traitor of the Dark Hour. The old man asked angrily if Dahid had sent them. The hooded man told the old man to show respect when he uttered that name. Harkin said that this was unheard of insolence, because he was the teacher of that scoundrel. How could they destroy his barrier? Had Dahid himself come here? The man said that they had found the old man using an artifact to track mana. Harkin asked why they were looking for him, since so much time had passed. Carden said that the magical tower of Bogomern had recently been destroyed. Many mages had died in the process. There had never been such a catastrophe in the history of magic. Carden added that someone had brazenly accused them of what had happened. Therefore, a squad of assassins sent by the head of the magic tower was relentlessly pursuing the Dark Hour. The leader of the uninvited guests said that Mr. Dat believed it was the work of his personal enemy. The old man's name came up among the suspects. Would Harkin admit his involvement? The old man laughed. If he had the power to destroy an entire magic tower, Dahid would have been dead long ago. Verdun, who had been silent all this time, activated the triple spell. The fire wave of arrows was released, and the wind cutter and ice spike were activated. The protagonist did not understand what was happening, but now the magic tower was fighting the Dark Hour. If the people of Bogomern looked the other way, it would only play into his hands. Carden was surprised. Did Harkin really have a student? His colleague replied that he had not heard about it. In any case, they just needed to eliminate everyone, and that would be the end of it. Ferris said she could add him to her collection. The girl added that this face was perfect for her collection. At that moment, the fire skill was activated. Verdun realized that if a wall of fire was used against him, it meant that it was 4th level magic. The attackers were surprised. Did this young man really know high-level elemental spells? The others used wind and telekinesis. It turns out that this guy looks like Ma, who is in the middle of the 4th level. Ferris said she would give him a passionate embrace. Verdun pushed the girl aside and said he would refuse her offer. The skill Landscape Manipulation was activated. Carden was surprised. This guy uses a triple spell and also activates other attributes. But judging by the spells, his abilities are at best mid-level or upper-level, 3rd level. Ferris didn't understand why her suppression didn't work on this guy. Verdun counterattacked using fire magic. Ferris jumped aside in fear. Verdun lunged at the girl and grabbed her by the throat. Carden was surprised. Could 3rd level magic really break through the 4th level magic? What's more, he was using Ferris as a shield. Verdun understood that his opponents had numerical superiority. Ferris was outraged. How dare he treat her so roughly? Verdun activated Stone Wall and hid behind it from his opponents. Carden didn't understand how a traditional spell like Landscape Manipulation could be used with such power. Carden said that it was difficult for him to fight while protecting his comrades. Ferris shouted that she would finish him off herself. Verdun told Harkin to hide in another room. It was difficult to fight while protecting him. The old man admitted that the young man was doing well. Harkin asked our hero if he had mastered the magic of flight. An explosion was activated. After it, thick smoke appeared. Harkin and Verdun decided to leave the battlefield. The old man pointed in the direction of travel and told the young man to fly there. Verdun changed locations and landed near a small cave. The young man asked what this place was. In the cave, the old man ran to a cabinet built into the wall. The old man said that the one who had gone beyond the limits of magic and begun to forge his own path was a true magician. Harkin took a bottle of liquid out of the cabinet and handed it to the young man. Verdun asked what it was. Among magicians, Harkin is the great magician, and this very great magician ground up a rare herb and created a masterpiece that stood for 5,000 days, illuminated by the light of the moon and stars. Harkin said that if the young man drank it, he would gain a power that had never existed before. It would touch an area where no ordinary magician had ever set foot. Harkin warned that there were no side effects. If it was not the young man's destiny, nothing would happen. The old man added that there was little time left. He would not ask for sympathy or beg for wishes. The young man simply had to take this elixir. Harkan said that he only wanted to see what fate had in store for the young man. Verdun felt a strange and unfamiliar mana. He had the great mage's creation in his hand. The young man thought that the old man had no reason to harm him, so he could be trusted. Verdun said that there was no such thing as predetermined fate in this world. As an astrologer, magician, and witness to the fates of countless people, Harkan finally understood that nothing is predetermined. Verdun felt the effects of the liquid he had drunk. The old man raised his head and said that it was starlight. However, the fateful turn that Harkan felt suggested that the young magician before him was the very star that defied the heavens. Harkan said that he had been visited by someone who completely denied fate in the guise of a reaper. So be it. The old man promised the young man that he would give him everything, so he must go forward, a reaper swimming against the current. The old man took the young man by the shoulder and activated the memory transfer skill. Verdun began to function as an SSD drive. Verdun opened his eyes and thought that he had blacked out for a moment. What had happened? An unfamiliar but incredibly powerful stream of mana was now sloshing inside him. Had his consciousness been rebooted? Verdun couldn't understand what had happened to him. The exhausted old man said that he had successfully completed what he had started. Now he suddenly realized that he didn't even know the young mage's name. After thinking for a moment, the young man said his name was Verdun. The old man asked Verdun to burn his body and then lost consciousness and fell backward. The old man's memory of what he had devoted his entire life to was passed on to the young man intact. The old man asked to stop the dark hour for the sake of peace. Verdun put the old man's ring on his finger and said he would gladly fulfill his request. The young man thought that thanks to Harkan, he could now use 4th level elemental magic. The 3 pursuers sent to search for the old man tried to find him, but Harkan was nowhere to be seen. There was no response from Manu either. Carden thought that the compass had also stopped responding. Could Harkan have died? In any case, his body had to be found. Carden suggested that the old man might have set some kind of trap. Ferris suggested that he might have been crushed by a rock. Carden said that the guy who was able to stand up to the 3 of them would never have died from a rockfall. Ferris asked what they should do. Should they start digging? Her skin was already cracking from the cold. One of the pursuers said that something was wrong here. He sensed a huge flow of magical power underground. Maybe it was an earthquake. Carden shouted for everyone to move aside immediately. It wasn't an earthquake. It was 4th level magic. Carden said that someone had interfered in this matter. But who could it be? Suddenly, a hole appeared in the ground, and Verdun jumped out and attacked these people. Carden realized that it was the mage who was standing next to the old man. Verdun realized that the boundaries of his magic had expanded significantly. The young man thought that his mana flow was now as vast and deep as the sea. With the new attribute he had gained thanks to Harkan's elixir, he reached the middle of the 4th level in the blink of an eye. Something that would normally have taken years. Carden only now realized that this young man had been hiding his abilities. All this thanks to Harkan. Verdun said that as a token of gratitude, he would rid the world of the dark hour. The gust of wind skill was activated. Verdun was unharmed. The protagonist thought that he would destroy the headquarters of these killers later. The young man activated Wind Cutter. Verdun said that when he was fully ready, he would come himself to destroy their headquarters. The protagonist added that these 3 would disappear without a trace. Ferris got angry and shouted that there would be nothing left of this guy but ashes. She attacked our hero. The opponents approached each other at arm's length. The protagonist's face remained completely calm. Ferris was outraged. How dare he use fire in her presence? Now she would show him the difference between the 3rd and 4th levels. Verdun wondered if she was fighting at full strength. The young man noticed that this girl was not that strong. She couldn't handle him. Ferris couldn't believe it. Was he really pushing her back with fire? But he was a 3rd level mage. The flash skill was activated. The opponent was destroyed. Verdun said, -1. Carden decided that they needed to call for reinforcements. The multi-kinesis manipulation skill was activated. Next, our hero scanned the area and took control of the entire battlefield. The leader of the killers thought that this boy was capable of flawlessly controlling the flow of mana. Another villain was attacked, and his hand was seriously injured. The compass that had been used to locate Harkan fell to the ground. Verdun thought that this was the same compass he had seen earlier. It had a rather complex structure and would need to be studied later. Verdun thought that there was only one opponent left. However, this opponent escaped. The protagonist thought that if a fourth-level mage or higher was trying his best to escape, it would not be easy to chase him down. Verdun decided that he should use Harkan's legacy. Carden, retreating at high speed, realized that he couldn't handle it alone. Ferris and Shen had already been defeated, so he needed to call for reinforcements. Perhaps one day this guy would become a serious threat to the Dark Hour. Carden sensed that a unique skill had been activated against him: mana detection. Carden thought he had already crossed several mountain ranges. Despite the distance, his opponent was able to locate him. Carden continued to retreat rapidly. Something bright flashed behind him. Killer was surprised. Where was the light coming from? It was still far from dawn. What was it? Carden looked back and thought it looked like a bright star, but it seemed as if it was getting closer to him. Carden sensed danger, but it was an unnatural phenomenon. First and foremost, he had to escape from this unknown star, and as quickly as possible. He believed he should report to headquarters about the true nature of this guy. However, the fugitive was caught up. Carden noticed that his speed began to decrease, as if someone was slowing him down. Carden thought he had never heard of such a thing before. Could such magic really exist? Killer turned around and said it was just an illusion. After all, that guy was only a fourth-level mage. He couldn't use such a serious and powerful spell. Verdun dropped to the ground and stopped. He needed to gather his strength. The young man thought that as soon as he cast the spell, half of his mana disappeared as if it had never been there. It was hard to believe that this was ordinary magic. There was an explosion ahead. It was one of the 5 stars created by Harkan, the streaming star Meteor. It was a colossal force, and the amount of mana consumed was simply enormous. Verdun thought he needed to train. The boss was worried. He was already annoyed by the war with the magic tower, and now those he had sent to track down Harkan had disappeared. A man approached the boss with a prisoner whose hands were tied and whose head was covered with a bag. The man confirmed that the killers had disappeared, but he could say one thing for sure. The entire squad of 3 men had been killed. They had simply been wiped out. The boss was Dahit Vestrel, nicknamed Dark Moon. The assistant said that he had brought a resident of a settlement located near the Bard Mountains. His memory needed to be checked. Dahit activated his unique skills and used memory transfer. Dahit picked up information about this man's recent conversation, and the picture began to clear up. The boss realized that he had discovered a magical trace. Under the weight of the spell, the mountains collapsed. A powerful magical flame appeared, capable of burning down the forest. Dahit wondered if there were spells of fire of this kind. With such skill, it was only natural that they would be destroyed regardless of their numbers. The most likely culprit was Harkan. But how could that old man, whose mana contours were torn apart, have done such a thing? Could he have met with the saint from the Order of Lewis? Dahit said that a teacher who had reached the level of Grand Mage could well have done so. The assistant added that in that case, a pursuit party would have been sent out immediately. Dahit noted that there was no need for that. He was already dead anyway, and there was no need to search for those who had disappeared. Dahit added that he had given them to his old teacher so that they could keep him company in the afterlife. Verdun thought that the absence of this trio would not be a significant loss for the Dark Hour. It could be said that they got off lightly. Another assistant appeared and said he had an urgent report. He reported that the branch located near the Empire had been destroyed by Bogomern's punitive detachment. Dahit thought that the front line had shifted. Dahit reasoned that he had to endure a lot of humiliation for something he didn't even do. The one who was sent to the magic tower had disappeared. The head of the magic tower was extremely angry and furious. Verdun tasted the tea and said that it had a wonderful aroma. The young man was on a veranda in the center of the city. He assumed that he had managed to escape his pursuers. It was the resort town of Bryant. A few weeks ago in Harkana's hideout, our hero encountered the magicians of the Black Hour. To avoid possible persecution, the young man went to Bryant. Now the protagonist had reached the 4th level. The first 2 levels form the foundation, while the 3rd consists mainly of basic spells. The 4th level consists of destructive, large-scale spells. It was thanks to potions and magic that Harkan was able to reach this level in less time than previously expected. Verdun thought that even he, who had studied countless theories and techniques of the magic tower, was amazed by this mysterious power. How did the old man manage to create magic that had no attributes? This is impossible for a mage who follows only strictly established rules. A kind of miracle that is only possible for a mage who breaks free from the rules. A miracle that cannot be created no matter how much magic one has studied or how great one's mana is. Verdun thought it was too early to be disappointed in himself. After all, he had not yet set foot on the path of the great mage. It was better to think about how to develop Harkon's magic. Of the 5 stars engraved by Harkon, the young man could only handle the first one at his current level. And even that took too much mana. Verdun thought that the power of this weapon was enormous, but it was difficult to use in real combat. It would be better if one massive star could be divided into several smaller ones. It was also necessary to disassemble the Dark Hour compass. Verdun realized that he had too much to do and didn't know where to start. The protagonist said that it was time to repair the equipment. It was worth doing this first. The young man went to the city in search of a good smithy. He saw the building of the Khan Trade Guild in front of him. Maybe that would help him. Asher was greeted with open arms and called a benefactor. The man told him to come in. The best tea and drinks would be prepared for him. Later, they would discuss what goods the young man was interested in. Verdun thought that this was indeed a relative of Conrad, just as talkative. Verdun said he would like to purchase magical items. The man inquired, "Are we talking about magical items? Not only nobles come here, but also adventure seekers. Therefore, there is a wide selection of equipment and accessories. What is the young man interested in?" Asher said he was interested in a custom-made product. The man replied that there was such a craftsman, but there was one problem. This craftsman's skill was beyond question. However, he was a drunkard and a gambler, a real compulsive gambler. Recently, he had been pursued for his debts. The frightened craftsman told his creditor that he had no way to pay his bills. The creditor asked if he should not start working immediately. 8 million would not just fall from the sky. The creditor added that if this guy hadn't blown all his money at the mountain house in the first place, he would never have been in debt. What would the debtor do now, having had to travel such a long way because of him alone? Suddenly, a wad of cash fell to the floor, and someone's voice told them to stop. Verdun said he was ready to pay the 8 million debt. The creditor was indignant. Did someone allow this boy to interfere in a conversation between adults? The man told his assistants to take the money from the boy and teach him some manners. Suddenly, the man shouted for the men to stop. The assistants were surprised. What was going on with their boss? Did he know this kid? When the young man was a child in Brienta, which at that time was a city of crime, a frail-looking magician appeared. However, appearances were deceiving. Everyone who crossed paths with this magician paid with their lives. Now he decided to show how he managed to survive. The man knelt before the protagonist and asked for forgiveness. He claimed that he had no idea that this young man was a mage. The creditor said he was asking for the debt and nothing more. Verdun was surprised because he hadn't done anything yet. The creditor and his men said they were done and were leaving. He wished the protagonist a long and healthy life. The master asked the young man who he was. Asher said that he had been recommended by the Conrad Trade Guild. The young man added that he would like to order a product. Asher reached out to the frightened master and asked if this was possible. The master agreed. Asher warned that he would deduct 8 million from the commission fee. A few days after this incident, the young man thought that the Dark Hour compass was an ingenious device created with the help of magical power. All mana has the property of returning to its owner. Using this property, one must place the target's mana into the central crystal of the compass and amplify it with mana amplification. Verdun thought that they had created something almost equivalent to an artifact. Several days passed, but no one attacked the hero. Perhaps he had managed to escape persecution. Starlight. That's what the young man decided to call the new attribute he received from Harkon. Despite the perfectly chosen name, it was still difficult to fully control this power. Starlight connects and amplifies mana like a cluster of stars in a constellation. It creates a power that never existed before. The problem is that the contours of Verdun's mana differ from those of Harkon's mana. Due to slight differences in Harkon's pattern, it is recognized as a different pattern, causing the spell to behave unpredictably, leading to unexpected results. Verdun thought there was no need to rush. Now that the magical artifact was almost complete, he would soon be able to leave this place. A man approached the young man and said he had been looking for him everywhere. Verdun was surprised because he hadn't noticed the man approaching. The stranger ordered himself a cup of coffee. The man apologized for not introducing himself in a timely manner. It was Rissner. He was here on behalf of the Ark. The young man was surprised. Could it be that the Ark, which was the opposite of the professor's project with his non-humans, had come to him? Risnor stated that he was not here to harm the young man. Asher asked why the representative of the Ark had come here. Rinor asked, "Isn't the enemy of my enemy my friend?" Rinor reminded him that the young man's elimination of the professor was only to their advantage. Therefore, to ensure that the information did not fall into the hands of their organization, called Gluttony, they followed the young man and covered their tracks. Risnor said that this could be considered a gesture of gratitude. Although there were moments when they lost track of the young man because of his unpredictable actions, Asher sensed a foreign presence in the air and told Risnor to be quiet for a moment. The protagonist said he didn't know how these people managed to catch up with him, but he wanted to make one thing clear: they should never follow him again. He found it extremely unpleasant. Risnor promised not to do it again. Risnor apologized and said that they would no longer follow him secretly. Now that they had sorted that out, he could tell them why he had come here. Rinor said that the Ark is quite friendly toward the young man because his actions impress everyone, including the elimination of the professor. Risnor added that he wanted to talk about their ideology. Gluttony seeks human evolution through consumption, but the Ark has different views on this. Humanity becomes stronger through trials, adaptation, and evolution through hardship. This is the essence of the Ark's philosophy. Risnor noted that they had been watching the young man since he first showed himself. They saw that he was the embodiment of their ideal. The man said that in light of this, they wanted to offer the young man a job. Asher said he refused. Verdun noted that Risnor had come here not only because their ideology matched his beliefs. Rinor handed the young man a box and said it was a token of gratitude for eliminating the professor. Inside the box was a high-quality item from the Restoration series. It was a restoration bracelet. The young man said it was too generous a gift. Was he really that important to them? Rinor confirmed that it was important, but most of all, they wanted to maintain a friendly relationship with the young man. Verdun asked why the Ark and Gluttony were enemies. His interlocutor said that their ideologies were moving in different directions. Gluttony rejects the old humanity in favor of the new, which they call neo-humans. Meanwhile, the Ark seeks to find and nurture those who will lead humanity through numerous trials. Because of this fundamental difference, they have always been at odds. Risnor rose from the table. He said he had done what he came here to do, so now it was time for him to take his leave. The man said that if Asher ever became interested in the Ark, he could come to Lorien in the northwest of the country within a month. Lorien was a city that bordered the Forest of Demons. Runes are magical symbols that contain mana. The effects of runes vary depending on their arrangement. It was an ancient magical crafting technology, far more advanced than anything modern science could create. Although research has been ongoing for over 100 years, there is only one reason why they have not been introduced into everyday use. No one has been able to reproduce the process of engraving runic symbols. At best, people can only awaken runes that have already been engraved. Verdun placed a ring with runes in front of him. The young man intends to print the ring on which the runes are engraved. Pale said that he had been wondering for a long time why Asher was not there. Could it be that the young man wanted to study runes? After meeting with Risnor, Verdun briefly stopped by Cohen. Now that the young man had reached the fourth circle, he would need new things: a blue mithril staff and a mage's cloak. In other words, it was time to use the treasures he had taken from the magic tower. But since materials and expenses were still a problem, the young man put it off. When creating the orb, it was necessary to use the breath of the elements and the magic crystal. Among the items already linked to the grimoire, there was one last treasure left. The first task was to unlock the Ring of Runes. Verdun thought that first of all, he would try to find information by asking everyone he could. But now he had a place where he could find out a lot. Pale said that they, of course, had information about runes. Pale added that he knew someone who knew the location of a rune specialist. Asher asked how he could meet with the specialist in person. Pale replied that there would be no meeting. Artifacts with runes are rare. Runic research is not a particularly lucrative pursuit. Most of those who study runes do so as a hobby. Pale noted that Asher had received a special request that could help in this matter. Pale noted that the customer insisted on Asher's candidacy. Of course, the young man could refuse, but by a strange coincidence, the customer knew the location of a rune specialist. Of course, the young man could refuse, but by a strange coincidence, the customer knew the whereabouts of a rune specialist. Pale added that the customer was extremely picky, but if his request was fulfilled, he could satisfy the contractor's requirements. Pale noted that the payment for the request would be transferred separately. Since the customer had this information, Asher would not have to pay anything for providing the information. Asher, of course, accepted the order and arrived at the destination at the appointed time. The guard at the gate stopped the young man and asked him to state his name. The protagonist said his name was Asher and that he had received a request from Pale. The guard told the young man to follow him. The mansion's decor was rather modest for a count's family. The guard's knightly armor was practical. This clearly indicated a man who valued real strength over outward appearances. Pale described the client as a pragmatist who only did what was profitable for him. The guard reported to the count that the mage he had hired had arrived. The man asked if this was indeed the mage Pale had sent. The young man bowed and repeated that his name was Asher. The protagonist realized that the man behind several of his previous orders was none other than Count Rodenmeyer. The count said he wanted to treat the young man to a tea called Golden Buds of Fury. This tea was difficult to prepare and even more difficult to obtain. It could not be drunk just whenever one felt like it. The young man had to take advantage of this opportunity. It had been a long time since our hero had smelled this aroma. The head of the magic tower and his minions often drank this tea, so our hero knew how to prepare and consume it. Since the aroma goes well with sweets, sugar should be added. The count was surprised. Did this young man really have such refined tastes? Asher replied that it was nothing to boast about. Meyer noted that the young man was very modest and unlike the useless mercenaries who roamed the streets. After tea, the count suggested they get down to business. Rodan Meyer said that he had an assistant, Baron Balon, who had recently been sent on a mission. He had even received word that the task had been completed. The detachment should have returned long ago, but neither the Baron nor his night bodyguards had shown up. The count said that he had already sent out a search party, but something had gone wrong. Therefore, despite the considerable expense, he planned to deploy additional troops immediately. In such situations, he trusted his intuition, which had never failed him. The count noted that he had sufficient forces, but this was a search operation, and therefore required the presence of specialists with extensive experience in such tasks. That was why he had summoned Asher. This means that he highly values the young man's abilities, considering how he has performed all previous requests. Verdun understood that he was under the influence of the mana detection spell. The count said that the young man would join the second search group, led by the commander of the Knightly Order. They had to leave that evening. Asher asked if he could act independently. Rodenmeyer replied that the young man should work with the others whenever possible. If it was difficult, he could take the initiative. However, if he returned empty-handed, he would not be paid. Verdun said he had one more question about the request. The count asked again, was it about a rune specialist? The count noticed that this man had been standing behind him for some time. This was Ronander the scribe. In his youth, he had worked as a rune researcher for a long time. The count said that the young men could talk alone and left the room. Ronander asked if the young man was the same Mr. Asher. He was ready to explain everything he knew about runes. Asher showed him the ring and asked Renander to help him with these particular runes. Renander was surprised. How did the young man get a runic ring? After all, it was a valuable item. Asher asked if his interlocutor could restore the magic of the runes engraved on the ring. If he succeeded, he was willing to pay a considerable sum, even in cryptocurrency. Renander said that restoration was not that difficult. No additional materials or fees were required. The man examined the ring carefully and said that it was called Superior. The ring amplifies all of the wearer's senses. The effect is immediate upon use. It is an item that is always active. Renander noted that in this case, all senses can become confused. If the young man is not careful, the heightened sensations can cause him to lose consciousness. He will not be able to stand on his feet. Even if Asher trained his body, the risk was high. But that didn't mean there was no way. Asher suggested that Renander engrave the ring's rune directly into his mana channel. Renander said it was suicide. Even if the young man survived, he could be crippled, and his mana channels would be destroyed. Renander noted that the young man's gaze was full of determination. If he failed, it would mean the destruction of the count's guest. But as a researcher, he wanted to try transferring runes to a human body. Renander said that the young man had been warned and proceeded directly to the transfer process. Contrary to fears, the young man reached the 4th level. Even if something went wrong, there was nothing insurmountable. Ever since Verdun left the magic tower, he had been ready for this. Verdun clearly felt every movement around him and the flow of mana inside his body. The young man's feelings raged uncontrollably. It seemed to him that he was going crazy again and again. The knights entered the city through the central gate. The young man informed Commander Balkan that the first search party had left their horses here and had not yet returned from their expedition. This was more than strange. The old man said that if the knight intended to enter the forest, it would be better to abandon the idea. The commander of the knights asked how the old man knew about this. The old man replied that he did not know exactly what was going on, but that the forest was restless. Animals and half-humans trembled with fear. The old man added that he had lived there for 70 years and had never seen anything like it. It was as if the forest was devouring life itself. The knight said that they would go into the forest anyway. He had been told that the first search party had disappeared here, right in the forest area. The young knight asked, was the young man really all right? What was the count thinking when he hired him? The knights carefully combed through the entire surrounding area. One of the knights reported to the commander that he had found the baron's carriage. The carriage was lying on its side and was broken in two, its contents scattered nearby. There were no signs of an attack. How was this possible? The commander said that it was now Asher's turn. The knight noticed that the mage had seemed out of sorts the entire journey. Could he be trusted? Verdun noticed that his emotions had finally stabilized. Now he was able to analyze even huge amounts of information. The mana detection skill was activated. The knight was surprised. Was this really called mana detection? He told the mage to stop before the mana burned him. Verdun, guided by his staff, pointed in the direction they should go. Verdun and all the other rescuers moved in the indicated direction, gradually increasing their speed. The commander of the knights thought that this Asher had incredible reflexes and magical abilities. Judging by his speed alone, he surpassed any mage in their order. The knight asked if he had managed to find the Baron. Asher replied that he had discovered a strange, powerful life force. The protagonist suggested that there was definitely something in this forest. Perhaps it was the force that had destroyed the Baron's carriage. Suddenly, the commander of the knights was attacked by a strange monster. However, wielding his sword, he managed to retreat and was unharmed. It was a Trint. The commander noted that this was strange. Usually, Trints only appear in dark places with high humidity. Apparently, he did not have to travel far to get here. Asher was surprised. Did he really come from nearby? The commander of the knights was surprised. Did the young man not know? There is a rather well-known place in the duchy. It is the Forest of Demons. Visiting this place is prohibited by decree of the guild and the duchy. Sunlight does not penetrate there even at noon, but the forest is famous for its abundance of all kinds of plants. Verdun remembered how he had been invited to Lorien, located in the northwest of the country. This city borders the Forest of Demons. The knight said that it was impossible for the Baron and his advance guard to be defeated by simple Trints. Asher realized that there was something else going on here and shouted for everyone to move aside. A knight emerged from the forest. The commander was surprised. Could it really be Brennan? The commander approached the knight and asked what had happened and how Brennan had ended up here. It was one of the missing knights, but he looked more like an undead than a human. Verdun began to study his gaze. Was everything all right with him? He noticed that Brennan looked more like a real undead creature. The commander of the knights did not lose his composure and punched Brennan in the jaw. This guy had an impulse. Maybe he was possessed or under a spell. The commander of the Balkan Knights shouted that restraints must be used. Suddenly, a gold-ranked adventurer emerged from the forest accompanied by a huge monster. Other monsters appeared from the other side of the forest. One of them had a mage on its shoulder. Balkan determined that the monsters and humans were in the same state as Brennan. Could it be that all the others who had gone missing had suffered the same fate? The commander of the knights ordered them to prepare for retreat and avoid battle. He hoisted Brennan onto his shoulder and began to retreat at a rapid pace. The knights followed his example. One of the knights shouted to the commander that he could see a hut ahead. Suddenly, a huge troll blocked the knight's path, with a mage on its shoulder. The knight looked at his opponents and said that it seemed they had missed something. After a while, all the knights found themselves in a safe zone. Asher said that the people should move on. Ahead, they saw a huge house surrounded by a golden glow. Verdun thought it was a disposable artifact engraved with spells of concealment and protection. Nevertheless, it would be enough to block their attacks. Using his magical abilities, Verdun decided to change the situation a little. The guy said he wanted to simplify the spell formula and then add formulas to fill in the gaps. Normally, it is impossible to perform both actions at the same time. However, now that his 5 senses were expanded, it was as easy as breathing for him. The knights were amazed. Was this guy really capable of changing an active magic circle while it was being set up? Considering his ability to detect mana at long distances, Considering his power and spell speed during the battle in the forest, it could be said that he was far beyond the third level. Asher said that everything was ready. The protagonist had been hiding his true abilities all this time. One of the knights ran up to the commander and said that Sir Balkan had to see this for himself. They found Baron Balin. Balkan asked the Baron if he was all right. No one expected to find him in such a place. Asher was surprised. Had the Baron created these magical circles of protection and concealment? No wonder he couldn't be found with the mana detection ability. The knight asked the Baron if he could explain what had happened here. Balin said that he had completed negotiations with neighboring territories on behalf of the Count and was returning home. When they reached the town at the foot of the ridge, he heard screams coming from the forest. Protecting the local residents was their duty. It was decided to go into the forest. The Baron reported that they had seen a strange tree in the forest. At first glance, the tree looked completely normal, but it gave off an inexplicable aura. The Baron ordered his men to check the surrounding area. Suddenly, people appeared on the branches of the tree. They were screaming and asking for help. Balin said that by the time he had gathered his thoughts, they were already surrounded by Trince. There were also crowds of people and half-people. They had not been destroyed, but dragged to the tree. After that, the tree attacked the knights with its sharp branches. The Baron told the commander of the knights that the tree was piercing their bodies with its branches and sucking out their life force. Balin added that thanks to Brennan's sacrifice, the two of them had managed to escape. The rescued knights said that the rest could not be brought back. They had died, turning into puppets of the tree. Commander Balkan said that in the name of their fallen comrades, his search party would become a punitive force. Balwin added that their target was now the tree. Anything that stood in the way of the county's prosperity must be destroyed. The Meyer family is known for its fencing skills. The Count is one of the most influential people in the duchy, both in terms of fame and power. However, his fame is not only due to his title. The main reason lies in the strength of the Rodenmeyer Knightly Order, consisting of knights whom he personally selected. The commander of the knights asked Asher to take on the search for the Grey Tree. They had never worked together before, but he believed it would be the best solution. As soon as the young man found the tree, he was to give the signal, and they would immediately set out for it. Asher took off, gained sufficient altitude, and began his search. He activated his mana detection skill. First, Asher put all his strength into casting a spell for a large-scale search for mana. The consumption was so great that his head spun. Nevertheless, his heightened senses detected a lot. After a while, the protagonist found what he was looking for. Now all that remained was to launch a signal flare. Asher decided it would be much faster if he did it alone. The young man activated the chain lightning skill. The enemy was struck by lightning and destroyed. Asher thought that, apart from its ability to control living beings, the tree was no different from a Trent. The tree looked ominous, but its weakness was obvious. The young man activated triple spell. He used the skill Flash, after which the tree was engulfed in flames. The fire burned with renewed vigor, the flames devouring the tree's branches. The commander of the knights was wounded and fell to the ground with an arrow in his shoulder. However, at some point, the enemy suddenly disappeared. Balkan did not understand what was happening here. A flash appeared far away in the sky. Balkan assumed that Asher had managed on his own. The young man had indeed finished faster than expected. However, a mutated creature slipped out of the fire from the place where the burnt tree had previously stood. Apparently, it had been parasitizing on the Grey Tree. The young man experienced the same ominous and frightening feeling he had felt earlier when he saw the Grey Tree. Now the condensed aura was hundreds of times stronger. Asher wondered in surprise, could this be the origin of the Forest of Demons? Count Rodenmeyer, watching from the window, concluded that the knightly order was in terrible shape. The Count said that Asher's actions had exceeded all expectations. The young man thanked him for his words. Meyer noted that he still couldn't believe that the young man had hidden the fact that he had reached the 4th level. He added that he was annoyed that the young man had lied to him, but it could be considered that the guy had simply done high-quality work for cheap pay. Asher thought that although there were no problems with the order, something bothered him. It was the place where he had given up the chase and turned back. Then Asher realized that there were no demons in front of him. Why do adventurers suffer so many losses? Some time ago, the Adventurers Guild and the Magic Tower conducted a joint investigation. An adventurer was walking through the forest and couldn't find his colleagues, Dean and Billy. But their hunt today was a great success. After all, he was right when he said they shouldn't come here. After the investigation, the Magic Tower collected data and presented the results to the whole world. The knight did not understand what had happened here, because he had searched thoroughly for everyone before. The reasons for the adventurers' deaths were usually poor skills, carelessness, or natural disasters. The adventurer threw back his hood and saw his dead colleague. However, among all the factors, the leading position was taken by a place located on the border with the demon forest. This place was called the Adventurer's Center, Lorien. The knight saw the motionless bodies of his colleagues. Having fulfilled the count's order, the protagonist rushed here. The payment was generous enough for him to improve his grimoire. Asher looked at the city and realized that this was Lorien. It was a city built specifically for adventurers. In the city, adventurers discussed the situation. Could it be that some particularly dangerous creature had appeared nearby? Could it all be because of the Forest of Demons? Asher thought it was too early to jump to conclusions. First, he needed to meet with Risner. At the tavern, the young man ordered a steak and a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon red wine. Come to think of it, they hadn't discussed the exact meeting place in advance. Asher hoped that the guy would find him if he waited a little while. Someone called out to the young man. He turned around and saw a girl standing next to him. She asked if he minded if she sat down next to him. Asher asked if she was Risner. The girl smiled. She thought her disguise was perfect. Mr. Asher had a keen eye. Asher thought that his companion's voice had become masculine again. Only his appearance had been changed with the help of the artifact. Asher said that it was very interesting, an artifact that only changed one's appearance. Risnor noted that the form the young man had seen in Briente was probably also a disguise. Asher got angry and changed his appearance too. Risnor said it was a joke and that it wasn't worth wasting mana. Renor put the box on the table and suggested they eat. There was an excellent chef working here. Risner said that the box was an artifact that blocked sound. They didn't have to worry about being overheard. Asher suggested that the item came from the magic tower. Risner asked what exactly Asher wanted to know. Asher asked what was in the Forest of Demons. Asher noted that he had experienced ominous feelings that could be attributed to simple anxiety. He often relies on his feelings. The protagonist noted that there was clearly something in the forest, and Reisner definitely knew about it. Risnor laughed. She thought the young man would ask about the Ark first. It was an unexpected question. Mr. Asher's intuition was simply impressive. Risnor said that the reason for their meeting was related to the Forest of Demons. However, first Asher needed to get some idea of the ideology and goals of the Ark. Asher claimed that people become stronger by going through trials. This is true, but trials are never easy. On a small scale, they affect the life of the individual. At the maximum level, an entire city, country, or even planet can suffer. Those who overcome such trials are universally admired. In the end, they become worthy of the title of captain, who will lead humanity forward. Asher wondered if this meant that there was a similar test in the Forest of Demons. What would happen if they failed? Risnor replied that in that case, everyone would perish. Not only the city, but even the country or the entire world could be destroyed. Risnor said that they were a group that existed for the sake of all humanity. They were not the guardians of each individual person. Risnor added that their role was to find candidates and let them grow by going through trials. Their job wasn't to put humanity under a protective shield and lead it into a new world. That is why they are on the lookout for trials. The Ark analyzes and predicts hidden dangers in the world. They lead candidates to these places. Asher suggested that their network is extensive enough to cover the entire continent. However, the world still knows nothing about the existence of the Ark. Depending on how their power is used, they could be even more dangerous than the Dark Hour. Asher inquired about the trial taking place in the Forest of Demons. Risner replied that she could not disclose that information. The Ark is looking for a captain who can handle various unexpected situations, someone who is always ready to act. Risnor said that they do not assign trials that a candidate is unable to handle. Given Asher's nature, he could be offered something. Is he ready to take part in the upcoming trial? Asher was surprised because tests are only prepared for Ark candidates. Risner replied that this was usually the case, but humans were creatures who tended to cooperate and exist side by side. Asher was surprised. Risnor said this as if she were sure he would agree. Risner laughed and said that this conclusion was based on a favorable attitude. Asher could look at the order with payment. Risnor placed a box and a vial on the table and said that this would be an advance payment. Risnor explained that it was a spatial bag and mandrake extract. Asher was surprised. Was this really mandrake extract? The peculiarity of this extract is that its effectiveness rapidly decreases as the dose increases. However, when consumed, it increases mana reserves. The extract is a material that can expand the mana contour without any effort or side effects. That is why it becomes the main ingredient for a high-level potion called mana core. Asher understood that this was a treasure for a mage seeking growth. But how did the Ark manage to get hold of this extract? It's surprising because it's very difficult to find. About 14 sprouts appear naturally each year. Mandrakes cannot be grown artificially. 10 magic towers monopolize one plant each, while the rest are seized by high-ranking authorities using corrupt schemes. Asher noted that the Ark's investments are excessive. Risnor explained that this is done to reduce Asher's distrust. Risnor added that the head of the Ark is extremely sympathetic to Asher, but the young man is too cautious and distrustful. The first step must be taken by the one who needs something. Risnor said that Asher could take the payment and walk away from the test, or he could face it. The choice was up to the young man. They only guide but do not coerce. However, if Mr. Asher is looking for strength, the trial will be the best way to achieve it. If Asher intends to avoid the trial, he should leave this place immediately. Otherwise, he will find himself involved in the matter. Asher said that he is not a coward or a deceiver. He is not used to avoiding trials. This kind of escape does not suit him. The protagonist made a decision. He would undergo the trial organized by the Ark and prove what he was capable of. The guards on the fortress wall noted that the forest had been looking gloomy lately. In addition, adventurers continued to disappear. Mr. Bartel went there specifically to make sure everything was resolved peacefully. The guards saw a knight run out of the forest and, picking up speed, approached the fortress wall. The guards had the impression that this man was part of Mr. Bartel's group. He shouted that there was an emergency and that the gates needed to be opened immediately. A report came in that the Trints were crossing the border of the demon forest. The leader was surprised. What was going on here, and what had happened to Bartel? The knight who arrived said that Mr. Bartel had stayed behind to hold back the Trints and other creatures. He asked to convey the following message. The Tree of Souls has appeared. The leader was frightened, just in case, but still asked what it was. There had been several cases where trees grew by destroying life. Most of them were eliminated in the early stages of development. However, if a sprout grew for a long time, hidden from human eyes, the level of danger became completely different. The Adventurers Guild classifies this level of threat as the highest, special entity. The leader asked if the speakers were sure that the forest was really that dangerous. The assistant replied that they did not know for sure yet, but if all the missing people were connected to the Tree of Souls, then the city was in danger of destruction and annihilation. The city's residents must be evacuated. Bartel must also be supported. One of the knights volunteered and said he would go to help. He promised to save Lord Bartel and destroy the Tree of Souls. The townspeople were surprised. Why were the bells ringing again? Wasn't this a warning of danger? Had the kingdom of Estria declared war? The man announced to everyone that a dangerous species had appeared in the Forest of Demons. Volunteers are being recruited to defend the city. The punitive detachment has already been dispatched. The troops remaining in the city will help defend it and evacuate residents to safety. There is no need to worry about the punitive detachment. It is led by Lyra's blood-red blade. The knight asked the young man if he had voluntarily joined the punitive detachment. Asher answered in the affirmative. The knight said he had no time to look after the young man. If he got in the way, he would be immediately expelled. The knight added that the young man must defend himself. Asher thought that this was the knight Risnor had mentioned and called a hindrance. Did he really look that weak? The blood-red blade said that the Trent simply needed to destroy the core in the center, and with a skillful movement of the blade, destroyed the tree. The young man was surprised. Had the blood-red blade done it in an instant? Was it possible to do something like that with such ease? The blood-red blade said that it would clear the way first. The adventurers realized that this was the power of the approaches to the mithril rank. The leader of the group stopped Asher and reminded him not to get in the way. The protagonist declared that he could do it faster. The young man activated the double spell skill. Lyra's blood-red blade closely followed the young man's actions. Everyone noticed that Asher activated a huge amount of mana to achieve his goal. One of the knights noted that this guy also instantly activated the mana detection skill. Perhaps he thinks that Mr. Bartel is still in the forest? The blood-red blade thought that this young man was clearly at the 4th level, despite his youth. Maybe he was another candidate sent by the Ark? The knight told the young man not to dare interfere with his trial. Asher realized that he was facing a woman, a candidate for the head of the Ark. The female knight noticed that the young man had reacted to the words about the trial. That meant the boy was also a candidate. The knight said that from now on they would speed up. Those who could keep up could follow her. The rest should provide support from behind. Many decided to stay, considering it the best option. How could anyone keep up with such a monster? Lyra's blood-red blade and Asher developed great speed and kept up with each other. Asher thought that this female warrior was quite strong. Her fighting style was completely different from the butcher's chopping blows. Her chilling sword technique left no room for counterattack. The young man thought this is one of the candidates chosen by the Ark. Perhaps the Ark was a stronger organization than previously thought. Asher decided to return to the main problem. He thought that the Tree of the Soul was most likely the gray tree he had seen during his mission. The reason for the disappearance of the adventurer named Bartel must be related to this gray tree. However, the young man did not feel the energy of the tree or any traces of Bartel. Asher wondered, should he spread his mana over a large distance? In the north, there was a place that seemed cut off from the rest of the forest. It caught the young man's attention. Asher showed the knight the direction of travel and said that they should move in that direction. Asher approached the presumed location and activated the fire curtain. The young man decided that if he couldn't find it using mana, he would have to burn the entire forest to the ground. The protagonist decided to limit the Trint's ability to use their abilities. The Flaming Plague skill was used. The young man assumed that this would destroy all the Trints in the vicinity. Asher decided that now the Tree of Souls would surely reveal itself. Our hero saw a knight bound by tree branches on his hands and feet. When the knight regained consciousness, he found himself in a situation where it was impossible to resist the Tree of Souls. In front of the knight was a countless number of Trints, and he was surrounded by many empty white eyes. The branches tightly bound his limbs. Survival was his specialty, so this detail did not scare him at all. However, the continuous cries of the captives were exhausting. His life force began to fade, and he found himself on the verge of death. Now the knight was free. He understood that the branches of the Tree of the Soul had been cut off. But how did this happen? The savior asked the knight. Was he Bartel, a platinum-ranked adventurer and warrior? Bartel asked the young man if he had saved him. Asher said that the punitive detachment was behind them. The knight could retreat and regroup with them. Bartel was surprised. Did the young man really want to solve this problem alone? Asher confirmed that this was indeed his plan. Bartel shouted that it was reckless. It would be better to regroup with reinforcements and fight together. Bartel noticed that most of the tree was underground. Bartel shouted for the young man to buy time until Lyra's blood-red blade arrived. She would bring someone else here. Asher thought, does it really look that weak? However, now he no longer needed to hide his strength. He had to check what the main body was doing underground. The ground beneath their feet shook. The adventurers were frightened. Was it an earthquake? The blood-red blade was surprised. Was it the work of that mage? The part of the tree that the young man saw underground was indeed large, but it turned out to be only part of one branch. Asher realized that this tree was monstrous in size. If something like this reached the city, it would turn the earth into a living hell. This could not be allowed to happen. Asher thought that this must be the test that Risner had mentioned. The problem was that this monster was hiding underground. Even an earthquake didn't work here. After the previous mission, our hero updated his spellbook and reached the 4th level. Should he try terrain manipulation? The knight saw Bartel approaching them. How good that he was unharmed, because they were very worried. Lyra's blood-red blade shouted that it was her job and rushed to where the protagonist was. The adventurers saw the Tree of Souls and were frightened. Had this tree always been so huge? How could anything like this be defeated? The commander of the knights shouted that an evacuation order must be given immediately. The leader said that a Tree of Souls of this size was capable of mentally destroying the city. For a long time, the Tree of Souls hid underground, continuing to grow. From time to time, many adventurers combed the area in search of such trees. But since this sprout was hidden from view by a layer of soil, no one was able to find it. As a result, the Tree of Souls survived and spread its numerous roots underground. Dominating the forest and consuming countless living creatures, the tree continued to grow. Soon, this place was nicknamed the Forest of Demons. Finally, the Tree of Souls reached the final stage of its growth. To grow into a full-fledged tree, it needed to consume 1,000 life forms as food. This was what was supposed to happen in the future. Asher thought, the greater the mass, the more mana must be used. In addition to Asher, monsters were also flying in the sky. The flying monsters were attacked from the ground with arrows. Asher activated the skill Firestorm. However, after this attack, not a single twig on the tree moved. Asher thought, maybe I should run away. Does he really think he can defeat this main body? Why try to prove his power? Maybe he should give up and just enjoy a peaceful and serene life. The protagonist was hallucinating. The tree was capable of using mental attacks. Asher said that in any case, this tree was weaker than the one he had destroyed in the magic tower. A colossal blow was dealt to the earth's crust. The tree's branches were torn to shreds. A knight appeared nearby and asked, hadn't the young man heard what she had said earlier? Of course, she was grateful that the young man had pulled the Tree of Souls out of the ground. However, she must overcome this trial on her own. She would not give up this role to anyone. Therefore, it would be better for the young man to step aside. Asher said that this was very selfish. The Lady Knight would not die from his spells anyway, so it would be better if they attacked together. The Tree of Souls panicked when faced with two opponents putting up fierce resistance. At that moment, its primal survival instinct kicked in. This situation was extremely dangerous. Therefore, the Tree of Souls decided to release all the energy it had accumulated so far. Even though this meant it would take centuries to recover, the Tree of the Soul dragged everything alive in front of it into a nightmare, including the mage standing directly in front of it. Asher, kneeling on the ground, did not understand what had happened. Just a moment ago, he was in the forest. The man said, is this really a first-level mage exceeding his limits? That's quite an impressive result. Asher raised his head and wondered, could this be the head of the Balrog magic tower? Balrog asked, is this all the young man is capable of? Verdun thought that after everything he had done, he still hadn't managed to reach the level of Balrog Besias. Our hero had overcome countless trials to achieve all this, yet he was unable to leave even a scratch on the body of the head of the tower. Balrog said, a mistake remains a mistake, even if it is beyond one's capabilities. The head of the tower added, trash like Verdun is just a hindrance to the magic tower. The young man said it was just a dream. The head of the tower was surprised. Had Verdun gone mad? The young man must have been completely desperate, unable to even reach his toes. Verdun lunged and grabbed the head of the tower by the face, saying that he did not believe what was happening. Verdun couldn't believe that this was his future self. Verdun squeezed his fingers so hard that blood flowed from the tower chief's face. He said he couldn't lose to someone like Balrog. The tower chief was stunned. What was the young man doing? Verdun told Lyra's blood-red blade to wait for him a moment. Under the young man's onslaught, the tower leader was blown to pieces. Verdun informed the knight that his actions would not take long. Under the pressure of his opponents and in a state of panic, the Tree of Souls continued to release all its accumulated energy. Asher was subjected to the negative external influence of the Tree of Souls. His condition became unstable. Lyra's blood-red blade also entered the same unstable state. The little girl looked at her bloodied hands, her face filled with fear. The girl looked back and saw motionless bodies lying in a pool of blood. The child did not understand where she was. The girl realized that all the people around her were dead. She closed her eyes and cried. The hands of a demonic creature reached out to the child. The girl became more and more frightened. The monster said he was on the verge of evolution, but ended up losing his chance. Now people will have to fully experience his despair. The monster grabbed the girl by the face and said that humans could try to resist, like kicking their legs in a cauldron filled with his curse. Half-humans surrounded Lyra's blood-red blade from all sides and rushed to attack her. The knight successfully fended off the enemy's attacks. At one point, the mage finally appeared behind her and distracted some of her opponents. Asher approached the Tree of Souls for a series of blows aimed at crushing it. Asher said that no one would be spared from his wrath. Now he was as steadfast as a rock in the wind. The protagonist noticed that the Tree of Souls was moving slower than before. This must be taken advantage of. The young man understood that by plunging his opponents into a nightmare, the Tree of the Soul had put all its strength into the blow. Such a chance could not be missed. Asher thought that attempts to crush this creature with stones were useless. Of course, it could be destroyed with starlight. But then the dark hour would begin again, and half of the city of Lorien would be burned. The protagonist decided to use the Thundercloud skill. To do this, he raised his staff high and activated the magic circles. But he couldn't rush. He needed to accumulate a more powerful charge. Asher uttered a triple spell. The lightning, compressed by magical power, was the maximum result the young man could achieve at that moment. Asher directed the lightning at the Tree of Souls and activated the complete destruction of the triple lightning. Thunderstrike. The dark ghost holding Lyra's blood-red blade behind its head was struck by lightning and destroyed, falling apart into pieces. The female knight was freed. No one was hurt. Lyra's blood-red blade looked at the young man and thought he was a magnificent mage. She would have to get his phone number. It became clear that the trial was over. The Tree of Souls was engulfed in flames. The female knight said that the young man had done well. She asked if anything had protected him from mental attacks. Asher replied that he had been defenseless. The female knight asked if he had not even been tormented by hallucinations or nightmares. Asher admitted that he had seen something. The knight asked why he was fine then. Asher replied that he had no reason to fear something that would never happen. The young man asked if that answer satisfied her. Lyra's blood-red blade replied that it was enough for her. Ahead above their heads, many flying lights appeared. According to the records, after its death, the Tree of Souls spews out the souls it had previously absorbed. Now each soul goes where it belongs. The partners decided that this could be considered the end of the trial. They had not heard that one trial was immediately followed by another. Asher thought that this was a little disappointing. Compared to how Risner had painted a grim picture of the situation, everything turned out too easily. Initially, this scene was not prepared for him. Therefore, perhaps it was not worth looking at everything from his own perspective. The young people were finally able to meet. They learned that their names were Asher and Lyra. The girl was surprised that she had never heard of such a powerful mage before. Today, Asher had been of great help to Lorien. Rissenor, watching from the sidelines, said that he had expected much less. A foreign creature attacking souls, the Tree of Souls. It had grown to such an extent that its bark had become harder than metal and could withstand the strongest blows. In addition to this, it had acquired a countless army of trints and undead. Risnor thought that the most important thing was the nightmare that even Lyra, one of the top 3 candidates, could not escape. According to initial calculations, at least 4 cities were supposed to disappear in the process of this test. Who would have thought that a 4th-level mage could deal with such a monster in just one night? Who was this guy, Asher, really? The grateful citizens asked the savior of the city of Lorien to accept gifts from them. They thanked him wholeheartedly for his help. Several days passed after the raid on the Tree of Souls was completed. It took a long time to consider the payment of a reward from the guild, so the young man had no choice but to stay here. During this time, rumors spread throughout the city that the hero of the expedition was a mage with silver hair. Thus, Asher found himself in the spotlight, even though he did not want it at all. The protagonist thought that perhaps there was no longer any point in hiding his power. The young man looked at the tower located under the cross. He thought he saw a familiar face in the window. There was indeed a girl standing outside the window, Lady Lyra. A girl appeared in the room and said that grilled fish would be served for dinner today. Lyra thanked Vinna for waking her up. The girl suggested that they go down to the dining room together. Vin said she didn't really like fish because of the bones. Lyra warned that if Vin was picky, Louis might not like it. Lyra looked out the open window and saw a young man on the other side. It was Asher, who happened to be passing by. Asher looked into the window and their eyes met. After a while, the young people sat down at the table and ate together, washing it down with delicious wine. Asher asked Lyra if she found it comfortable to eat with a veil over her face. The girl replied that beautiful women always have to endure discomfort. Lyra added that she was joking. However, she was more interested in one thing. Was this Asher's first trial? The young man confirmed this. Lyra admitted that this was quite a rare case. Usually, the first trials that had to be completed were relatively simple. However, the problem of the Tree of the Soul was not one of them. Lyra had, of course, heard that all candidates personally selected by the Ark were special. She still found it hard to believe that a person her age could have such a huge reserve of mana and such fast and powerful magic. This guy also possessed incredible mental fortitude, as he was able to withstand the nightmares of the Tree of Souls. Lyra wondered how Asher came to join the Ark. Asher thought that he had never actually joined the Ark. However, in this case, it did not matter. The young man replied that it was a rather useful organization. Lyra said she had the same reason. She didn't care about the ideals and ideologies they followed. Lyra added that the only thing she wanted was to find a way to remove the curse she had to hide behind this mask. Curses are conventionally divided into 2 types. The first type is psychological attacks, classified as black magic, or spells that suppress power. Second type is the curse of the devil, one of the heteromorphs. There are dangerous curses that are the complete opposite of divine power. For example, those that lead to the gradual and irreversible decay of the body or the deprivation of its life force. Asher thought that Lyra's case was probably closer to the second option. The young man asked if the girl had become a candidate for the Ark in order to remove the curse. Lyra replied that this was her goal. With the power and information that the Ark possessed, it would be easier for her to find a solution. The girl added that this way she would be able to find the demon who cursed her and took her family away. Asher thought that Lyra was driven by a desire for revenge. It turns out that you can join the Ark even if you have personal goals. Lyra asked if Asher knew anything about demons. The young man replied that due to the close supervision of the Order of Luas, there were not many magicians left on the continent who studied demons. Lyra was upset, so the young man would not agree to make a deal with her. Asher asked what kind of deal she was talking about. Lyra asked if the young man could find information about demons and pass it on to her through the guild. She added that she would pay a fair price. Asher agreed because he had nothing to lose anyway. Lyra promised that Asher would definitely not lose out. That was not her style. The girl got up from the table and said that it was time for her to go. She had spent her time well. Asher said that he also had one question. The young man asked when the next test would take place. Lyra replied that she did not know. The tests always began suddenly without a specific time being given. Lyra added that it was always possible to refuse or challenge the test. The Ark did not force anyone. The girl added that the choice is always theirs, as is the outcome of the test. The young people said goodbye until their next meeting. Several days passed. Asher was still in the city. The head of the Adventurers Guild branch in Lorien, Mr. Payvaltz, said that the young man had made a truly incredible contribution to the victory. Payvaltz added that his monetary reward would be credited to his cryptocurrency account within a few days. Asher inquired if there were any other rewards. The head of the guild branch said that there were other rewards. They found them in the heart of the destroyed Tree of Souls. Calculating the reward took some time as they studied whether this item was worthy of payment. The result of the study was that the branches have a strength superior to metal and are capable of self-repair. The material has higher water permeability and electrical conductivity than mithril. These branches can be considered an extremely rare material with great potential. Based on Lyra's testimony, it was concluded that it was the young man who made the greatest contribution to the elimination of the Tree of Souls. Therefore, he was awarded 2 branches. One branch will go to Lyra and the other to the guild. Asher was delighted and thanked them for the gift. The young man left the office of the guild branch head and immediately flew into the sky, using his unique abilities. Breath of the Elements and Magic Crystal, branches of the Tree of Souls and Mandrake Extract. The young man can use all of these for his growth right now. He needed to create a sphere using the Breath of the Elements and the Magic Crystal. Since Asher had branches of the Tree of Souls that could withstand the power of this sphere, such a foundation would be sufficient for creating a staff. Even if the search for a craftsman who will take on the order goes through Pale, the cost of other materials and labor will amount to hundreds of millions of elks. There is still not enough money. The young man returned to the city. He understood that there was only one option left: to create a magic core based on Mandrake Extract. Asher entered the same empty establishment again and met the same bartender. The man, his face hidden, greeted him and offered to accompany the young man. Asher was surprised. After his first visit, no one had accompanied him anywhere. Asher asked where they were going. The man said that from now on, the young man would always be accompanied. Asher thought that, unlike the meeting rooms he had seen so far, the room he was led to was particularly luxurious. But why had they changed the meeting room? A voice came from behind the screen. The man apologized if the change in the room for exchanging information had taken the young man by surprise. 3 types of people were meeting here. The first are those he trusts. The second are those who cannot be stopped by glass or iron bars. Pale peeked out from behind the screen and said that the third type were those who met both criteria. Pale added that he was eagerly awaiting the arrival of Mr. Asher.